great to see a lot of new faces here at Council, so thank you very much for showing up. I'll introduce myself. My name is Caitlin Robinson, and I'm the chair of the Concordia Student Union. So all of your questions and statements are going to generally come this way. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of stuff procedurally, since there's a lot of people who haven't been to Council before. So when we're talking to get on the speakers list, raise your hand or your placard if you're a councillor or an executive, and I'll put you on the speakers list. Unfortunately, I don't know many of your names, so if you want, you can create a little thing with your name on it, or I'll just point to you in the order that you raised your hand. I'll get to you in a second, Rory. Secondly, so I see we have a lot of people, and we have the CEO who's graciously come here to answer questions and speak. That being said, nobody in this room is here to be harassed or be bullied, so everyone's going to respect each other. So if there's any ad hominems, any name calling, anything that's out of order, I'll cut your speaker's turn and we'll move on to the next person in the interest of efficiency. That being said, there's no speaking over one another, so the person who has the speaking turn, who has their placard, or who has the floor, that's the person who's speaking, and that being the person that I call on. As for questions, you can ask questions to the exec, councillors, each other, anything like that. Just direct your questions through me. You get one question and one follow-up, and then that's it. Are there any questions about the procedures? Yes, Rory.
I think it's valuable for you to clarify for the members that aren't councillors or aren't voting members their rights to speak, move, second, etc. So if you can clarify for CSU members who are any student who pays CSU fees what their rights are in this meeting.
All right, well that one's easy. You have speaking rights, all of you, if you're fee-paying members of the Concordia Student Union. So that means an undergraduate person in arts or science, fine arts, JMSB, independent student, forgetting one, engineering, there we go, sorry. Then you're allowed to speak at council. Only executives and councillors may make motions, and only councillors may vote. So that's that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I can point you out the relevant bylaws that state said things. Is there any other questions? All right, that being said, let's get started. So there's a couple of procedural things to get through first. The roll call sheet should be going around. If anyone could just hand it out. So you can sign in, just have a column for voting or non-voting, put yes or no, so that your name will show up in the minutes. That being said, I will begin by reading the Indigenous Solidarity Statement, which I will find in one moment. Sorry about that. Alright, so we'd like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Ganyan-Gehaga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Montreal is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. One other thing I forgot to mention, sorry, CUTV always films our meetings to then post on YouTube. If there's anyone who would not like to be filmed, it's very difficult if everyone in different places raises your hand, so if you would not like being filmed, I would suggest either moving to the side outside of the purview of the camera, or kind of finding a corner maybe, because if there's 5 different people in 5 different places, it's going to be very difficult for Louise, and the CSU does have a motion to record all these meetings. So if there's anyone who'd not like to be filmed, you can raise your hand. Sorry, raise your hand. Okay, that's good. There's just an individual right here. Okay, so that being said, we can move along with the agenda. So at this point, we are on approval of the agenda. Yes, Rory?
I'd like to table 6, 7, and 8,
okay,
and add a new agenda point before 6, 7, and 8 underneath 5.
You want to table all of new business substantive?
Basically what I want to do is I want to create a new agenda point.
Okay.
I want to place it before all other agenda points to give it priority.
And what's it called?
Open discussion on elections.
Okay.
Which means that 7E, or no, 7C could potentially be placed afterwards.
Yeah, that could work.
I want, to summarize, I want everything election related to go first.
Okay.
And then anything non-election related can be dealt with after,
Okay.
if time permitting.
That works. Let me just rearrange the numbers. Okay, are there any other amendments, additions, subtractions, modifications? Yes, Roy?
Can we deal with consent agenda at the end as well?
Deal with consent agenda? Well, usually it's just approved under approval of the agenda.
Well, then I'd like to take that as well.
Okay. Is there anything you want to remove from the consent agenda?
It's just the approval of the minutes.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay, I'll add that to the end,
Yep.
at the bottom. That is good. So it's going to be the last thing in substantive. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else? I thought I saw a placard over in this general area. Nope. Okay. So that being said, I just need a motion from the floor to approve the agenda and all items under consent. Yes, Caleb?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
And all items under consent. Thank you. Seconded by James. Is there any opposition to approving the agenda? All right, so that carries unanimously. And if you'll give me 2 minutes, I will just PDF this and upload it so that people can follow along.
Uploaded where?
Yes. Yeah, right.
Sorry, uploaded where?
It's going to be uploaded to the council Facebook group. Is there any way to make it public? I put it on the CSU.
Post it on the CSU Facebook
Yeah, there you go.
page.
Okay.
Could you
Yeah.
send me the PDF?
It is in progress.
Yeah.
Sorry, the internet's very slow.
It's uploading. All right, there we go. So the agenda should appear in the CSU's Facebook page momentarily. At this point, I just need a motion as well to approve Camille as the minute taker for tonight. Yes, Caleb?
I move to approve Camille.
Okay, do a second. David, is there any opposition to Camille taking minutes? All right, that works. Okay. David. Okay, great. So at this point, we are on open discussion on elections, and the floor is open. All right, I'll just take a speakers list of James. Rory, was that a placard?
Yeah.
Okay. Rory, Patrick. Okay, Victoria, and go, James.
Right, so I would like to move to a motion to give the floor to candidates and visitors so they, for let's say 15 minutes, so they can air their concerns before anybody can respond, right? So they can air their concerns and that would kind of give a list of what their concerns are so that people can then respond to them. So let's just say 15 minutes, reserve the time to anybody that's neither an executive nor a member of the council of representatives.
Okay, do we have a second? Rory, do you want to motivate James?
Yeah, so I think that the fact that a lot of people are here kind of shows that they have a lot of concerns, and I think that these concerns should at least be heard so that people can kind of see where people are coming from, and then if there are any responses that they have, those can be made kind of knowing what everybody, with the majority of the, what areas they lie in, right? So if any questions, anything, that can all be kind of not jotted down on a list, and it can be answered kind of one shot instead of going back and forth.
All right, thank you. Rory?
Move to amend.
Yes?
I'd like to amend to give the candidates that were running this election the priority floor first, to air their concerns one after another, and then we can open the discussion for both councillors and members at large. I think we need to prioritize the candidates to air their concerns first, but we don't need to be like opening the floor for a 2-hour discussion from every single person in the room.
Okay, do we have a second for candidates?
Friendly
Patrick? Okay, is the room friendly to giving the floor to candidates for priority? Okay,
Point of information.
yes, Sophie?
If you follow the CSU Facebook page, you can find the agenda. It's been posted. It's a status update.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Caleb?
No. It's all good.
Okay. All right, is there any opposition to giving the floor to candidates running in this election priority for 15, 20 minutes, we'll say? Is that good? Okay, so in that case, that carries unanimously. The only thing is that I don't know who is and is not a candidate, so just we'll rely on your honesty and being adults to get this over with. All right, so the floor is open. Yes, Victoria.
Thank you. Is it okay if I stand in the middle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. For those of you who do not know, my name is Victoria Bolanos Roberts. I was one of the candidates for the one open arts and science seat in the last election, the election that has now been cancelled. So good evening, CSU councillors and executives. Before I get really into my speech, I want to take the time to thank every student who is here and every student who has voted Tuesday, November 26th. From what I have gathered talking to students, many decided for the first time to vote in this CSU election. Many candidates and councillors have put time, sweat, and dedication into their campaigns and referendum questions. I also want to point out how student voices have been brought together through all faculties for the first time in a while without outside influence. This is the point of council, It's cooperation and listening that brings us here, nothing else. Now that I've addressed those that I needed to address, I'll now be discussing the elections and how students, as well as myself, have been affected by a lack of clarity and transparency regarding the events from the previous couple of days. The council is supposed to be composed of 27 seats. Currently, JMSB only has 1 out of 6 representatives. Engineering has 2 out of 4, fine arts 2 out of 3, and independent students remain majority vacant. This means that 8 out of 8 seats in council are currently without representation of large absence in each faculty. If the CSU Council of Representatives is supposed to represent students, then why are we pushing back the elections when students will not be represented fairly for the months of December and possibly January? If the CSU, I believe that there are secrets that are being kept from the students. During campaigning, the candidates were never emailed of the change in the CEO, nor were we ever emailed that the elections were pushed back. It has been 21 hours since the official post. Why are we still kept in the dark? We have yet to receive anything, and let me remind you, 21 hours. The CEO states on Spotted Concordia that she was hired on Monday. However, every candidate got an email from her on Saturday afternoon. The CEO stated that she was given a tough role in a limited time, which is true. But if the executives knew that the election couldn't have happened with such a time restraint, then why did they not cancel the elections beforehand? Or why did we not call upon Elections Quebec, for example, who helps universities host elections free of charge? Why were these things not communicated to the candidates, and why were they not communicated to the students? We are applicants who want to work with the CSU, not against, and allowing us to be informed, we would have openly helped. I cannot stress the lack of communication that have caused an overwhelming pressure. We would have helped the CSU and the CEO, and we would have relieved stress on their behalf. The CEO states today that the expenses of the election does not equal $51,000, as many of the bookings have been canceled. However, we have not yet received a breakdown of the expenses. You have provided us with what is happening, and it has only been 21 hours since the elections have been postponed until January. Does that mean that the bookings were canceled prior to the cancellation of the elections? Or does it mean that the whole truth is not being revealed, for they would still have to pay for the booking and for the polling clerks regardless of the cancellation? What does this say to everyone who put time out of their day to be there as a polling clerk or for security? This is money that has been wasted. I know the executives will say that the CEO and the CSU are separate. However, considering that the emails that were sent out to polling booth workers concerning cancellation of elections were sent by the CSU electoral staff and from executives' personal emails, as well as the current personal relationship between Claire and the general coordinator, it calls for concern. This also comes into question as for the CEO was never given an interview for a position, but much rather an executive order was issued for someone who was close to the general coordinator, who is their little sister in their sorority, in power. I also know that certain executives in this room, have been campaigning against candidates in order to fill the seats with the people who they want. And the CEO has stated she would favor some candidates over others if it gets down to details. The students who are here should be represented fairly and not through personal agendas of the CSU. We candidates and students believe that the CSU has responsibility in addressing everyone today in this meeting and hearing out everyone in this room. This isn't about saving face anymore. And as Samantha Candido said on Saucy CSU memes, there are good people in this room. Make yourself known and please work with us. Thank you.
Thank you. The floor is open. Yes, sorry, what's your name?
My name is Victoria.
Oh, Victoria.
As well. Hello, everybody. So, did you?
Oh,
want to say
yeah,
something?
counselors are going after, so just continue.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Victoria Pesch. P-E-S-C-E, if you need to know how to spell
Oh,
it.
no, I was just going to say Victoria.
Perfect, do your thing. So we're here today because we actually care about the CSU, we actually care about Concordia, and we actually care about doing well for the students. So I don't know if any of you have seen my campaign, but my campaign was do better and be better, and I truly believe that as Concordia students, we can do that. We're here today because we're human and we understand mistakes have been made. We understand that things don't always go as planned, but we're here to help. We applied because, again, as I have said, we do want to make change and we do want to help the CSU. Now, you guys do have a lot of responsibilities and that shouldn't fall only on your shoulders. In business, we're taught that to stay on top of things and to ensure action takes place when action is needed. You are all informed that the elections were going to happen as of September. Normally, by-elections happen during October. So, sorry. There should have been outlines prepared for the voting. There should have been things in place in order to ensure that things were done. Yes, fine, the CEO did resign. Again, we did not get an email for that. We did not get information on that, which is very unfortunate because we did not know. We didn't know who to contact. We didn't know how to deal with our elections. With that said, there should be a template in place so this does not happen again. And I did email the CEO or the CSU, I don't know who received my email, but there was actions that could have been taken place. Yes, fine, the elections had to be canceled, but you could have added another day. You could have, there's so much that you could have done, but essentially my biggest point was, yes, you canceled one day, but a lot of people went out of their way to vote. A lot of us candidates spent a lot of time and money and energy getting people to get out and vote. And it's just, I find it's very unfair to us. All of us here, as is mentioned, gathered together today because we wanted to speak to you guys, we wanted to help you guys, and wanted to let you know that yes, we are very upset about what happened, but we do want things to be better and we do want change. We have come up with a list of essentially requests to help solve the solution or to help fix what you guys have, well, I don't want to say what you have done, but what has happened. So first, unfortunately, I have to say this, but we would like the CEO to resign with a written apology to all the students. We are running to be a candidate because we want to represent the CSU, and we find after what had happened, it kind of makes you guys look like a laughing stock. It doesn't make us look good, and if we want to be a part of this, we want to have the respect from the students. We want students to respect the CSU and be a part of it and want to be involved. Another thing that is very important, the CEO should not be paid for these elections. They are canceled, there's money, anyways, that's a whole other debate. We want to also ensure that there's no more candidates that can apply for January because it's not fair that the rest of us have been putting all this time and work and now you want to add extra people or put other pressure. And the thing is too, we want to extend the mandate of our, I guess you could say, getting voted in. We have put so much time and effort into this and it is unfair if we're only allowed to go to 2 council meetings because if it is pushed till to January, we only have March and May to actually do something, and it's just a waste of our time, our energy, and again, as we said, we want to be representative. There was other points I wanted to make, but out of all honesty, we're all here from JMSB, from Gino Cody, Fine Arts, Arts and Science, and we're standing here today because, like I said, we want to do better and be better. We understand that things have happened, we understand that there was mistakes that have been made, but from this point forward, we need to be able to build and do something progressive. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other candidates who would like to speak? Yes, what's your name?
Esther Moran.
Esther? You have the floor.
Okay, can I say sitting here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so I had concerns about the polling clerks because when I went to speak to them, they said they couldn't vote, which I find very democratic. So I wanted to see for future elections if they could vote. Then I asked other people who did do the polling, who were at the booths, and some people told me they could, and some people told me they couldn't. So I wanted to see if they could or not.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Person privilege. Could you just speak up a little bit?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Also, I had a couple people tell me that they were promised, in the previous elections, they were promised $15 per hour, and they were paid $11 per hour, and they still haven't been compensated.
They were supposed to be paid 15 and they were only paid 11.
Also, I wanted polling clerks to be compensated for the hours that they have not done, but should have done. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Salman.
Salman?
Hi everyone, respected council and chair. I would like to start with saying that I was an ENCS candidate for the by-election that just got postponed yesterday. Starting with a real moment of silence here because we talk about a lot of things. We talk about saving money. We talk about like go green. We talk about a lot of things, but we actually don't practice it. What we I will just talk about myself right now. I as a student have seen for the past some years. Starting with the response rate from the CEO, the candidates still, as my co-candidate and my friend said, that it has been several hours that we have not get any acknowledgement from the CEO, from the department, or from anyone as a candidates. We were the candidates, we were supposed to know what's going on with our nominations beforehand, before the things were even started arising in your table or in your knowledge. Moving on to the situation of what occurred between the past CEO and the statement that was released last night. The statement clearly was a blaming game and also just to get rid of your hands. Okay, we did nothing. It's just the blaming game because the past CEO was not, I don't know where she left and what happened. Starting with how the CEO was elected, we have rights to know that. I know only council are allowed to interview them and elect them or select them after the interview. How the current CEO was elected, we want a written statement on, we should know that, how she was being hired. What was the criteria in what criteria she was hired. Because she just said like there was a lot of things that was not done here and was not cleared, and the past CEO just left the job and she took it over. Why you took a job when you know that things are messed up? Sorry if I'm using non-council words. Things were messed up, and after knowing that she took the job, it was given to her or she took it with the exec, I don't know, we need a statement for that. She took it, and then there was a chance, there was a time, then the election should have been postponed, should have been cancelled at the point when the CEO got resigned. But no, the exec and I will say the council decided to continue with it with a very immature way, without talking to the candidates, without putting them in a knowledge. Most of the candidates just know about there's a new CEO today. oh, there was a new CEO, like most other candidates are like that. So, first point, how she got elected. Second, what was the criteria under which she was elected? Because in her statement she said like there was a lot of things that was undone by the past CEO, why she took the job, and why the cancellation and postponing the election was not done at the right time. They decided to waste the student money on the first day of election, and they just tried to cancel it after half day of passing the election.
Sorry, parliamentary inquiry?
Yes.
Are these direct questions? Can someone respond to them?
Yeah,
As
everyone's
she said,
gonna go
there will be
through-
corresponding
Yeah, everyone's
afterwards.
gonna go through
Yeah.
and then if there's any responses, the CEO or the executive will respond to the questions. So
No.
we're just gonna let all the candidates.
Yeah. All the questions.
Might be someone is
I'm
putting,
trying. No worries.
working on it. If you want, I will repeat them afterwards. I just wanted to end my things in two things. In the past, there's a lot being done, and people always say it in the past, no one responded, and now there's a big like amount of people coming after the exec or CEO. It's not that, it's just students reacted late. It's reacting late, it's better than no reaction. Students are coming now, they are being informed about what's going on. It's good, and the person who are on the seats, they should be responsible and they should answer in a correct manner. Coming from this first point, answering union should be transparent to students what they are doing, what the projects they are doing. Union always does something which are not notified to all the students. They are responsible for 35 to 40,000 students in the university, undergraduate, paying fees, the member of the union, but they are not informed or notified about the projects and what the union has to offer to them. It has always been done in a very quiet manner, so the people who they like or are likable should come in the council or should come in their projects. It's always quiet, it's never publicized, it's never been notified to the student. As a UNCS student, 80% of the UNCS don't know what's going on in the union. Why? Because it's not being publicized in a manner that they should know. That being said, thank you so much, and I hope it will be answered today in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I will let the candidate who has not spoken speak. Arad?
Thank you. Part of my attire, just like any part of this electoral process, I was not made aware of today's meeting. So, just like I wasn't made aware of any other part of this process, such as the postponement of the elections or the new CEO. And this affects me personally because I started on a platform of transparency. I really wanted to make sure that students, myself and students, my fellow students, feel involved in the process and know exactly what's going on with the CSU, with council, with basically this amazing service that we have available to us, which we all, I see, we work hard to accomplish. But yet, despite all these efforts and despite being part of this process as much as I could as I was running, I was still completely confused, as were all of my colleagues in unison. And I hate to point fingers. I don't like pointing fingers. I'm a pragmatic person. I like to see problems solved and rather than just blame thrown. But why are we perpetually in the dark? This is what I really need to know. And this is why we are here today, because we don't have all the information. We still, to this day, as we are speaking, half of it are trying to figure out what has been going on. So why is there such confusion? Are there any reasons behind this information being held back from us? And so I'm gonna keep my little speech short and just leave it to anybody over here who can help us understand why we've been kept in the dark. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw your placard up. Sorry, what's your name?
Danielle.
Do you want to speak?
Not yet.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So Victoria?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add, again, we're all here today because we want to know exactly what had happened. And as we said, I did email last night. I said, listen, like, I understand that you guys needed to cancel the elections. I understand that things happened, but you had 24 hours. You had that night to figure it out, to do something, and maybe just add an extra day on the Friday and waste less money. I just think that you guys are a union, you guys are a group, and you guys should have been working together in order to communicate properly. And as, what's your name again? My friend? Margot. She had told me that the elections is run only by the CEO and no one else is allowed to help, and I don't think that's ultimately fair. I don't think the pressure should be just on one person. As said, this is a council. You guys should be helping each other out. This should be a collaborative effort, a team effort. I just wanted to add that in.
Point of personal privilege.
Yes.
I said that only the CEO is in charge because otherwise it would undermine the democratic integrity of our elections, as would like having potential councillors undermine the democratic integrity of the elections.
Thank you. Esther, did you want to say something? Okay, sorry, I thought you were saying placard. So,
I spoke, but I know Lee hasn't spoken
Oh,
yet, and
are
he
you-
was a counselor.
Ken?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Ken.
So I'll try and keep this short since my voice isn't that fantastic right now. So basically, oh yeah, my apologies. Lee, L-E-E. So like I said, I'll keep it short. I think one thing that we can really focus on as a united CSU is that we should definitely make improvements from here, and that we should look at what did go wrong, what didn't go right, and improve on that. So that way we ensure that when we have the next elections in January, March, that they are improved. So stuff that we've seen, that we all noticed, that information received from Spotted. Personally, I didn't get, like, I mean, it's not right, obviously, that we shouldn't be getting the information I've seen in the post, but the information shouldn't be from Spotted. It should be directed to candidates when the decision has been made that we are canceling the elections. Going back further, we should know that the candidates themselves should know that the CEO has changed. And then continuing further, before that, some candidates did receive the wrong nomination forms. So that's a couple different things that definitely should be improved. As a candidate, I definitely feel that improved communication would definitely be something I would love to see in our next election, whenever that is. And then that's really my point. It's just we can improve, we should improve, and I'd love to see that improvement.
thank you. Salma?
Yeah, just to add to my point, not as a candidate, but I'm talking as a student, undergraduate student. After this meeting, whoever, I'm just requesting this, whoever has been like officially and non-officially like elected or like related to this whole scenario, they should not just like do apology publicly, but they should also consider that a lot of students were hoping on them, and they didn't went through their responsibilities, and council should take action against it, that they were responsible for something that is too big, election, and it didn't went through, and it should be taken care not just in the way of written or apology or spoken apology, but something else too. Thank you so much.
Victoria?
Thank you. Before I get in my speech, I apologize if at any time I become too passionate and it seems too charged. Concordia Student Union, student emphasized. I ran on a candidacy that stressed accountability, which I know that some people in this room did not appreciate. One person, however, is not here, so I will not name them. However, I do know that they were actively campaigning against my candidacy, messaging personal friends of mine, asking what their opinion was on me running, sending photos of my campaign. And as a student union that is supposed to be completely separate from the electoral process, I think that is unacceptable and completely unprofessional. Furthermore, and while I say this, I want this to know this is completely independent. These are only my thoughts. Personal emails were used by executives to send out emails promoting the CSU referendum question, which is a huge violation in almost any way. No personal email should be used, solely business emails. The CSU referendum question used their own logo, which is not it's not allowed. Finally, we talk about accountability. Every meeting has become a closed session. And I hope that today remains open because you guys owe it to the students to have all of their questions and all of their voices heard. Why is it that yesterday the meeting was closed? None of the candidates were ever told, by the way, we are discussing the current measures that were taken. We want you to have a forewarning. Do not promote the elections. Nothing was ever told to us. And for it to be pushed back into January, you're robbing JMSB students of their seats. You're robbing engineering students. You're robbing fine arts, and you're robbing independent students. I won't say you're exactly robbing arts and science because we're 13 seats that are there, but that is still one seat that is vacant. So when we move forward today, and when you guys are all able to finally respond to what we're saying, keep in mind that everything that's brought on is coming from a place that we have put so much flippin' time into this, and no one is being held accountable. And the more that you keep on closing off your meetings from everyone, the more that anger grows. That is why whoever posted on Spotted said, be mad, stay mad. It's because no one's being heard anymore. And that's all I have to say for this moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Point of information.
Yes?
I thought that we only opened the floor for 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was like 15-20. We're at 22, so I was going to say I think that's the last candidate to speak. So.
Can you repeat about something between the closed session and the dispersing of campaigns, the emails?
Yes, so there's an executive who was sending out, actually just show you because I have the screenshots, but they were sending out to clubs concerning the CSU referendum question using personal emails versus business ones.
So their personal email?
Yes.
Thank you. You don't have to write everything. Okay, so at this point we have a speakers list of counselors and executives, and in order goes Rory, Patrick, Sophie Beauchamp.
Has everybody signed in? Can anyone who hasn't signed in please put up their hand? Yes, all good. Needs to sign in?
Oh, actually, do you want to go first before the?
I would prefer so I can answer the questions that popped up.
Is everyone amenable to the CEO speaking first? Okay. All right, perfect.
The executive would also need to address something as a
Yeah, it's on the yeah, you're third on the speakers list, but people were raising their placards, so you can't jump the line, unfortunately. But I will allow the CEO to speak since the questions were directed at them this whole time.
Okay, I just want to make a little word of warning. I was typing as you guys were saying, so like if it sounds cold or rude in any way, I'm very sorry. It's not meant to come up this way. First of all, also I just want to say it's fine with candidates who bring out that they worked really hard on the platform campaign. I don't think you should mention what you were campaigning for, because that's part of campaigning, and right now campaigning is not authorized, so just cut that part if possible. So to address the questions that were raised, there were concerns that the candidates spend a lot of work on their campaigning period. Their work is not denied or canceled or anything. You don't have to erase what you've done previously. It's just postponed. You can still keep the same posters and all that, just change the dates if necessary. If you had ads or anything, it's like, it can potentially just be placed back to January. Regarding the concern that, I know that you had misinformation on my hiring period. So basically what happened is I was hired on the Friday evening. So I was given some documents and I just went over the bylaws and basically I just went home. So I did email people during the weekend to figure out what was going on. My first official day at the office was on Monday at 9 a.m. That's when I actually started the printing process of the ballots and all that. Before that, I had not been in the office or anything like that. I was not hired as the CEO. I mean, basically on Friday was like a brief training period, and then my official first day was on Monday. As regarding the expenses that have been done today, the polling clerks were canceled at about 1 a.m. So they were not paid today. We made that clear with them. They would not receive money for hours that were not made. We're still figuring out if they're going to receive a compensation for the overall contract or not. That's to be determined. The same thing for security. As soon as we reach a conclusion that the elections were postponed, I made the security aware of it, so all the security agents were canceled and they were not paid for today, nor will they be paid for tomorrow. And not only security, but all the bookings that we have canceled them. We canceled them either in the middle of the night or we canceled them first thing in the morning at 7 a.m., so we should not be charged for any of that. Regarding the way I was hired, I'm aware that I do have a personal relationship with Sophie, but the way my hiring came out was that basically Sophie made a general post on Facebook saying that she was looking for help for the election. I contacted her asking like what was this about, and I sent her my CV. She then provided the CV, to my understanding, to the CSU council, and it was decided that I would be hired. She notified me, I think, Friday morning, and then I told her that I would be able to come by Friday evening to have a brief training session. The way this worked was, I didn't have a proper interview per se, that's true. But at the same time, I don't think an interview was required necessarily in this moment because it was an absolutely emergency situation. Either the option was that I needed to be hired, or no other CEO could be hired simply because there was no other candidates. So the elections would have had to be postponed anyway. And also, I don't remember who, but someone mentioned, like I think it was you, Salman, who mentioned how I came to be appointed. So basically, according to the bylaws, the CEO needs to be democratically elected, I think it's by the CSU Council. In the case where this initial CEO resigns, it's the duty of the CSU Council to fill in the position as soon as possible with a candidate. There's no real mention of democratic I'm not sure how to put it, but like when someone resigns, it's just to fill out the position as quickly as possible with a candidate who fills the requirements. As for the person who asked for my resignation, I will not resign because as I have previously stated, a CEO resignation is the last thing that is currently needed. I don't think my resignation would help in any way the current situation at the CSU and for the whole polling going on. If this scares people because somehow I'm affiliated to Sophie and they don't want to see me for the next elections, that's not a worry. I'm not going to be the next CEO for the elections in January simply because I will not be a student in January. Therefore, I'm not eligible to be the next CEO. However, I will supervise how we change the next CEO, and I'm going to make sure that I train them the best I can, and I'm going to make sure that they have all the information on what they need to do and all the things that happened and came to light today and in the past few days, so they don't repeat the same mistakes. So basically, I'm just going to like oversee everything, but I won't be involved in the January elections per se. I reread the bylaws, and also it does mention that members of the elections, so polling clerks, DOs, CEOs, are not supposed to vote during the elections simply because they're involved in the election process. Someone mentioned the $11 per hour, I think it was you, Esther. This is currently not an issue for now, for this very instant. I was made aware of the $11 situation for the past elections today, actually, in the afternoon. I immediately communicated the information to the finance department, and they said that they would try to oversee that as soon as possible. Right now, we're just trying to fix what's going on currently. As of right now, the polling clerks and everyone is getting paid a fair wage, so the $11 an hour is not a current problem for this election. But it is something that we are aware of, that I mentioned to the finance department today, and that we will try to get into as soon as possible. Multiple concerns emerged about me emailing the candidates immediately about the canceling, well, the postponing of the elections. Should I have done that? Yes, absolutely. That was my mistake, and I do apologize for that, for not communicating with the candidates as soon as possible. Actually, the initial plan was to email the candidates as soon as I had released the statement, and as soon as I had communicated with the polling clerks that they were cancelled for the day. It's no excuse, but at least to put you in the context, it was about 1 a.m. when I finished with the polling clerks, so I was absolutely exhausted, and it just completely slipped my mind to contact the candidates. I also received several emails throughout the day, like in the morning I had several emails waiting for me from candidates, so I just assumed that they had gotten the word. I assumed wrong, and yes, I should have sent a proper email to everyone, and I do apologize for that. My current play as of today regarding the candidates and how to keep them in the loop. During the meeting, it was potentially planned to decide on a new polling period, decide on new dates for the polling period to happen, and then email the candidates with clear instructions on how to proceed with their campaigning period, their campaign material, and all that info that they might need. So I did intend to talk with the candidates as soon as possible, but just after this meeting, after some things had been clear with the CSU, and after I had like the approval of everyone to go forward with the information I would share with the candidates. Yeah, I think that answers the questions that popped up.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll proceed with the speakers list, which is Rory, Patrick, Sophie, Michelle, Jad, Peter, Samantha, James, Rowan, Salman, Victoria to my right, and John. Rory?
Thank you. I'm going to try and go through some of my comments about what's been said by the candidates so far, and then I'm going to go through my list of issues as a councillor that I've seen with these elections, and maybe some responses to some of the questions that have been asked from my perspective. So, number one, secrets being kept. Secrets aren't necessarily being kept. Council does meet. We have very little participation from other members. That may or may not be council's fault or the executive's fault. They are open, they are recorded, they're up on CUTV. We do have closed session when there's things that are confidential, and when we go into closed session, it is because it is necessary for the corporation. Regardless of the membership, yes, you have a right to transparency, but there's also a need for privacy and confidentiality for legal reasons. Candidates were never emailed about CEO change cancellation. One of the concerns that's been mentioned by the candidates that I also share is CSU executives campaigning for either candidates, campaigning against candidates, or campaigning for or against referendum questions. There's been CSU executives that have used their emails, that have used their mailing lists, that have used their MailChimp accounts on behalf of the CSU to email out for or against a referendum question. That is absolutely a conflict of interest, and that is absolutely unacceptable as an executive in your position. So as a councillor, I'm saying that for everyone in the room, I think that is a absolute no-go. Concerns brought by council or by candidates about corruption and influence peddling, that's exactly what those types of actions create. The appearance of corruption, the appearance of influence peddling among the executive. And that's why things are brought to council, for councillors to make that accountable. This is where things will be held to account. This is why you're all in the room today. We should have known that by-elections were coming. They were scheduled for October. They were supposed to be in October. We notwithstood the bylaws, once again, just like last year, to hold them later in November. We knew in advance, we knew in September. We knew in the summer that we were having by-elections. We knew in the summer that we needed to hire a CEO. And I'm saying we, as the CSU in general. We knew we needed a CEO. We did not appoint one in time. Appointments committee didn't meet, appointments committee had other issues. We dropped the ball on finding a CEO early enough for them to prepare and commit to a job. Some of the demands. CEO resignation. The CEO was appointed on an emergency basis for a temporary period of time. So I think it's a little bit moot to demand the CEO's resignation because they were already only hired for a very specific reason for a specific period of time, which is now basically elapsed. As councillors, we will need to discuss, we'll need to have a further discussion about payment, about whether the CEO is paid, whether the DEOs, the polling clerks are paid. There are opinions on both sides of this. I know some students feel angry that their student money is being spent when there's a situation like this that occurs. However, we also have to keep in mind that people have dedicated their time, they've signed up to do a job, They've foregone other opportunities, for the JMSB people, opportunity cost. They've foregone other opportunities in order to sign up for those jobs. They need to be paid. $11 an hour, in my opinion, I don't think is a living wage. I think the CSU has passed resolutions in the past about what living wage is, and $11 an hour is not that. So we'll have that clarified in a minute by the finance coordinator, but if these people have been paid $11, that will be fixed. We will motion to have that fixed. I'm not leaving the room till we do at least that. Okay? Other candidates, polling clerks not being able to vote. I think that explanation was quite clear. I agree with that. I think that's just a democratic sort of principle. Promised 15 an hour, paid 11. That's a concern. They need to be compensated for what they were promised. I'd like to see a final election expense breakdown. This is a request that a lot of people have commented on Facebook. I know a lot of students want this information. It's only yesterday. It's only the last couple days. Give us some time. Maybe it will happen tonight, maybe it won't, but we will provide you a breakdown. We do need to see, I need to see a breakdown of what rooms were booked, what cost was it, what security was hired, what cost was it. Not the budget, not the $50,000 number that's been posted on Spotted Concordia, because that hasn't been spent. There's not 50 grand that's been spent. I want to know exactly what has been spent thus far, as of yesterday, as of today, on these elections. I promise you it's not 50 grand. It's still money, and it's still important, but it's not 50. So until we have that number from the finance coordinator, let's not go assuming. Saving money going green. Great. There was a referendum question for online voting. Those are some of the things that were pushed for online voting, some of the good reasons for it. I've been on the CSU now for 2 years. I've been involved on campus for the last 4 years. I've been on CASA. I've seen elections there. We've done elections that were cheap. The CSU really has no excuse to have expensive elections. And that's just my opinion as a counselor. How was the CEO elected? The CEO was appointed by an executive decree. Technically, that is allowed. Technically, because it was an emergency situation that the CEO resigned, the executive was able to decree an appointment of someone else. They did not do this without consultation. They did consult with council. It was brought to our attention as councillors. We didn't have a meeting necessarily, but I do believe that the executive showed some good faith in saying, look, we have a crisis. What can we do? Here's an option. Do we all agree? And as councillors, we informally allow that to occur. There were questions about what the CSU offers to students. I think that's a broader concern about the CSU in general. What services we provide, where the money goes, how much executives are paid. Let's try and have those conversations maybe next time and not confuse or muddle the waters with election issues. The fee levy restructuring question has nothing to do with what services CSU provides or how much executives are paid. Let's just separate that. I've already answered the closed session issue. I have a really big concern about the privacy of ballots. My biggest concern about this election from a councillor standpoint is that when it was postponed, regardless of the postponement, there were ballots left on tables. There were lists with student numbers. I saw photos posted online of someone with a sheet, a handwritten sheet with student numbers and information about voted for referendum but not voted for JMSB. Voted for this, didn't vote for that. I went and voted yesterday. I showed up at a polling booth and I was in a rush and I said, hey, I just want to vote for the referendums. I don't want to vote for the councillors. I just want to vote for the questions. Here's my student card. Yeah, great. I literally grabbed ballots from the table. I could have grabbed, they weren't even watching. I stuffed them in the ballot box. I don't even know whether they wrote down my student number. But yet I see the next day, I see today a photo online with my student number on a sheet of paper that's been left on a table somewhere. The CSU as an organization has a legal duty to protect the identifying information of our student members. We are given a right in the Accreditation Act that we, so frequently like to quote. We are given a right in that act to information about our members. We're given a right to their names, their addresses, where they live, their phone numbers, their student numbers. We have the right to all that information. We can ask the Dean of Students, and we get a big long list of all 36,000 of you. But yet we can't protect your student numbers and what you voted. That, I think, is one of the biggest concerns this evening. It's not whether the elections were postponed. I appreciate candidates' rights and candidates' concerns. But from a legal perspective as a councillor right now, my big concern is we've just opened up our asses for liability. There were concerns brought up that when emergencies during the elections occurred or were brought up, why didn't the executives, work all night? Someone said, why didn't they work all night? They had all night to fix this type of thing. Some of my concerns about elections are as follows. The executives need to remain separated. However, when the feces hits the fan, when stuff doesn't go as planned, when things are falling through the cracks, it is the executive's job to run the day-to-day operations of this company. And it is a company. It's a non-profit, but it's a company. They're the CEO, the CFO, the COO. It is their job to run the operations of the company. If the CEO resigns, if the CEO, gets hit by a bus, and we have candidates and we have election boxes out there, and someone's like, oh, I gotta get paid, all this type. At the end of the day, they're responsible. Regardless of no election peddling or influence, they are responsible. So in my mind, when we had a CEO resign at the last minute, or we had someone say there's no serial numbers on ballots, I understand if executives don't want to appear to be influencing elections, but in my mind, at the end of the day, they have a responsibility to step up, to do their job, whether it's in their job description or not. Their general job description as an executive, as an officer of the corporation, is to fulfill its operations. The buck stops there. It's not council. Councillors, we're here once a month in the room and we vote yes or no. We have discussions, we vote yes or no. We approve things. We have authority, but we don't act. We don't tell them how to do things. We don't do things ourselves. That's their job. That's their responsibility. And in my mind, they failed that. We didn't appoint a CEO in time, concern number one. The executives, their job in the summer, when they come into their role, is to read the bylaws, to read the standing regs, to know what their duties are, to know what's coming up in future. CSU councillors may have no experience whatsoever. They show up once a month and they vote. The executives are paid, they have a job. They come in, they learn their job. Whether they were given much training or not, they have a duty to learn their job, to know what's coming up in advance. CSU executives should have known there were by-elections, should have known we needed a CEO in advance, should have instigated the hiring of a CEO in advance. Council brought concerns months ago about the call-out for CEOs. We only had a few applicants. It was not done well enough. Councillors told executives, we don't think the call-out for the CEO was done well enough. We want it to be done again, or we want it to be done better, or we're concerned about how it was done, period. Councillors, we were stuck between a rock and a hard place of having to appoint someone because of lack of time and lack of preparation from executives. We not withstood the deadlines for elections last year. It's in minutes, it's on record with the corporation. We should have known. Why did we have to do it again this year? We should not have had to postpone something a second time. We literally copy-pasted the motion from last year to postpone elections. We limited the CEO's ability to do their job, the first CEO. We had a CEO that was appointed. We limited their ability to do their job. We had a council meeting where concerns were brought up about their use of CSU resources. There were motions made, there were comments made to limit the CEO's access to the CSU's, graphics design team, printing, those types of things.
That's closed session information?
I wasn't at that meeting. So I'm not talking about any closed session information. I'm talking about the public information that is out there already. I wasn't even at that meeting, so if it's closed session, I have no idea.
Fine, good.
Okay? The CSU, during a meeting, prevented the CEO from accessing CSU resources. They told them they couldn't use the printing, the design, the communications team. So while they were complaining about the CEO being appointed late, pushing elections already, we then taped their arms behind their back and said, oh, you're only limited to using the design and communications team for a certain number of hours? To me, that's ridiculous. We can't voice performance concerns about the CEO if we're not giving them the tools to do their job. And I think the executive did not give them the tools to do their job. There's obviously a conflict of interest with the second CEO that was appointed. I think that's been mentioned by candidates, the fact that there's a personal relationship between the general coordinator and the interim CEO. I'm concerned that executives refuse to put work in onto elections when the CEO or when these issues arose. Once again, the buck stops there.
Point of
Getting a little.
point of order and information, I guess. I did not leave the office until midnight last night. I was at the office until after 9 p.m. on Monday. To say that executives were not putting in the work because there was no one there to do their job is not true. And I'm not going to have people continue to spread misinformation about the amount of work that was put into this by the executive, despite the fact that we are not supposed to have direct influence in the elections. And I'm sorry, I'm putting that out there for everyone to hear, but that I have worked the equivalent of 4 working days in the past 3 days on this issue alone, and I'm not going to have people say that the executive team has not been trying to do their best to ensure the day-to-day of the administration of the union can keep going.
Okay, my general opinion, to sum up, is that from what I saw as a councillor, the executives were spending more time campaigning inappropriately on referendum questions for and against, or for or against candidates, than they were on actually making sure these elections happen successfully. And with that, I tender my speaking turn.
Thank you. Patrick?
Now that it's brought to my attention what General Coordinator Sophie said, let's consider when this mandate started. It started June 1st. We had 6 months to do this. I'm not happy as a councillor what happened. I can't put words into this. The first thing I want to touch on is this appointments issue. Is that we had 6 months to appoint a CEO. We had 6 months to put on a good by-election. And what happened? We're here right now. This is just a failure on the CSU as a whole for this. It's just unacceptable. And I'm going to be honest. For the past 6 months, it's been every single council meeting. There's been something, who are we going to attack this council meeting? And it's probably why we're here right now. I'm livid about this. To touch on another point, is this illegal campaigning? I've seen these screenshots. I've seen them. I've seen the logo of the CSU on these screenshots. I've seen the mailing list used. This is illegal campaigning by the CSU executive, and I'm disappointed in this. They know the regulations. They should not have done this. On the last point, the CSU CEO, what can I say about this? We've had 2 CEOs since, and I understand why the last CEO resigned. It's because we couldn't even just have a conversation with the CEO. We wanted to politicize it. We couldn't have to ask questions behind closed doors. We had to go to make a council meeting and make the CEO feel intimidated. What the heck? I expect better from people in this room. I expect better. We should not be assuming the worst in people. If you have performance concerns, maybe go ask the person a question. If you're concerned about someone doing something, go ask the person a question rather than creating a council meeting where this person felt intimidated, wanted to leave. I can't believe this happened, honestly. And honestly, I hope this changes tonight. I hope we change our electoral practices. I hope that we change how we talk to people in this room. I hope that we change how this union functions from this day forward. This cannot happen again.
Point of information. I believe I'm allowed to interrupt.
Yes. but only if it's necessary to continue with the functions.
Anyways, I see my time. I'm livid.
It personally affects me, which is why I'd like to ask if I can do it.
Probably not a point of information, but what's your question?
It was more like a point made about the whole meeting called, if that's allowed.
You're on the speakers list, so I'm going to pass
Good
on
enough.
to the executive. Sorry?
Good enough privilege?
Yes?
Yes. Why did the stop is something directed toward this need to know?
No, that's the point of the speakers list. Sophie?
I'm gonna submit her into it.
Go ahead.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate your coming out here and saying your concerns. They're super valid. I would like to say that we've been working all day on a statement. We've been working on getting all the budget stuff ready to put out there. So we do care about it. We are putting a lot of work into this, and other concerns have been addressed, that like executives campaigning and so forth. We personally, maybe there's some miscommunication, we'll address it, but that's not what we were aware about when we were doing this statement, so it's not being addressed, but we will address it. And just to like give you an idea that we did the statement before these other concerns were brought up. Okay, so I'm just going to read the statement, and it's also going to be posted soon on the CSU Facebook page. Okay, so as was announced late last evening by the CSU Chief Electoral Officer, Claire Gerard Moreau, the by-elections originally scheduled for November 27th and 29th have been postponed until January. We would foremost like to extend our heartfelt apologies to the candidates, the Concordia undergraduate student body, and in particular the students who took the time to vote, to cast votes yesterday. We are also grateful for the hard work put in by the CEO and their team of deputy electoral officers and polling clerks. This statement is intended to provide clarity to the union's membership regarding the postponement of the by-elections and the circumstances that led the CEO to make this decision. We understand that students have many questions and concerns, and we would like to address these in a way that is fully transparent. First, it is necessary for us to clarify the role of the CSU executive team and counselors with regards to the election management. In order to ensure the integrity of the electoral process, the CEO and other election staff operate as independently as possible, fulfilling their duties without direct oversight. The CEO is wholly responsible for implementing the budget, hiring and training staff, and all other logistical affairs related to running elections. Although electoral officers can request information from permanent CSU staff members, these officers are not subordinate to executives or counselors. The CSU Judicial Board alone has authority over the CEO, and only in cases where official complaint procedures have been followed. The process of hiring the CEO is the only time where counselors and executive have a direct involvement with the elections. To reiterate, in order to maintain the integrity of our elections, it is impossible for the CSU executive team or council of representatives to be involved in election logistics, which led to the postponement. Although we understand, I'm just going to add about Rory's point about us having the day-to-day operations. It's very true, but we felt that it's much better than us interfering with the elections when we have an opportunity to postpone. Yes, it's not ideal. Yes, counselors or future counselors are going to be missing council meetings, but this is what we thought the best way for us to be not involved, for things to be done properly and with integrity, and also that wasn't our decision, it was the CEO, but that's what we recommended, and that's also what council recommended, not just the executive. It was also council. We wanted them to be part of it, and that was very important to us. Okay, so we recommend that students and other interested parties refer to the statement released by the CEO yesterday for specific information regarding the challenges she and her team encountered. However, we'd like to provide additional detail about the CEO hiring process. In this case, hiring was delayed due to a lack of response to our job callouts, which were disseminated via the CSU newsletter as well as our website and social media accounts.
Though a candidate was eventually hired, the fact that the position was filled late had a negative impact on the election timeline and made it challenging for the original CEO and their subsequent replacement to facilitate the elections efficiently and on schedule. We believe that the two CEOs who took part in this process did the best that they could considering the time constraints. Following the resignation of the initial CEO and factoring in the staff that had been hired, polling locations booked, and candidates announced, our team remained primarily concerned with endeavoring to make the elections happen as originally scheduled. It was this in mind that a replacement CEO was appointed. Ultimately, we support the CEO's decision to postpone the by-elections until January, as it is necessary to ensure that fair elections are held at times which make voting as accessible as possible to students. We reviewed the idea of having the election only being 2 days. We reviewed having an additional day on Friday. However, we felt that with all these inconsistencies that were happening, it would not be fair. It was really disorganized. There was a lot of probability for new things to come up and not be dealt with. And for it to be on a third day, there's just everything's done often in advance, and there's not bookings ready. There's not people hired for those days. There was a lot of complications. So just to give a little bit more information. We fully acknowledge, however, that these elections have not played out in an acceptable manner, and that some of the problems encountered could have been avoided had we initiated the CSU hiring process sooner. It's very true, and that's our mistake, and that's our fault, and we own that. In response to the postponement that we heard from concerned students on a variety of platforms, much of the feedback we've received has been constructive, and it is our intention to draw as many opportunities for improvement from the situation as possible. Our plans include thoroughly reviewing all election policies and bylaws, creating a CEO training guide, and standardizing ballot designs to ease their production in the future. We'll be hosting an information session next week. It's great that people are coming out here today, but we'll also have something next week to further have this conversation, if necessary. And it'll be announced tomorrow when exactly the date and the time, but it'll be next week. During the session, the CSU executive team will be present to field questions from students and to respond to their concerns. We hope this session will be helpful to further clarify how and why these by-elections required postponement and can amend the broken trust we know some students are rightfully feeling. Finally, we'll also be making budget-related information pertaining to the election publicly available, either tonight or tomorrow. So that's what we had as a statement. I'm sure other executives can add to things, but yeah, we're sincerely sorry, and we will be making improvements, definitely, and I'm very happy to see people come out here and talk, because we want more students to participate, and yeah, that's what can make the CSU great, so thank you.
Could I be able to just ask a question? Could I have to leave it? But it was just a question for the CEO.
Yeah, go ahead if you
I just wanted to know, because you said it was an emergency situation that you were appointed and that like it was low on time or whatever, and you were appointed on the Friday. If it was such an emergency situation, why did you wait until Monday to do anything? Like, it is your job, and I understand, like, yes, you're fine, you're getting to the position late, but if you genuinely wanted this position, you genuinely wanted to do something, why didn't you just get involved right away? Like, I just want to understand. I'm not trying to attack you or anything. I just genuinely wanted to know. Like, I'm sorry, I'm curious.
You can directly respond.
Okay. I'm aware that people feel like I haven't done anything over the weekend, which is not true. So basically what happened, I had a previous concern. Someone mentioned a similar concern about like why didn't I print ballots over the weekend. So basically what happened is that I had little to no indication on how to design the ballots. I sent an email to the office about that on Saturday morning. Sadly, the people in the office were out until Monday, so I got no answer about how to design the ballots. I still took it upon me. So basically, the independent printing company I was referred to was only open between Monday and Friday. So I decided that if I submitted the order on the weekend, ideally they would probably see it Monday first thing, and they would manage to get the ballots printed on time. That was my ideal situation. So I did submit an order during the weekend to the printing company with the ballots and everything. Then in the morning, on Monday morning, I went to the office and then I discussed the design of the ballots. and we realized that the design of the ballots was not proper and was over the CSU budget per the estimate provided by the printing company. So therefore I had to cancel that order.
Sorry, can I just ask, what was so special about this template that made it go over order? Because as far as I was concerned, when I voted yesterday, it was just a black and white sheet.
The ballot that you saw was the new ballot that we had designed on Monday. There was nothing special about the ballots that I had designed over the weekend, but it was missing several important information, and also the way that it was formatted was not right. For instance, the way I had put the candidate names and like the option to, I just put a little checkbox, but then I realized after that there were more candidates, there were more seats open in some faculties, therefore just one check was like not working. So yeah, so the ballot that you voted on Monday was different than the one that was initially sent to the printer during the weekend. The one sent on the weekend was even worse. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Did you have a point of information, Margot?
Is the office open on the weekend? Sophie? No, it's not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can
We
I
have labor
just-
laws.
Can I just conclude about this? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So just so as a point of information for everyone, I did do a part of work during the weekend. I tried to reach out to people. Sadly, most of my emails were left unanswered due to circumstances that were out of our control, simply because business hours are Monday to Friday. And yeah, the initial design for the ballots was just not right, and we had to delete the first order, so we had to redo it on Monday, and it was too late by now.
Thank you. Is it a point of information or to ask the CEO something?
I guess for information. I'm sorry, going by like model UN rules of procedure, so I'm sorry if I misinterpret. Right now we're entertaining executive and counselors. Will there be a time where guests or candidates can be added to the speakers list?
Yeah, anyone can add themselves.
Oh,
yeah.
work.
That was a good point.
Thank you.
Sophie?
Yeah. I would like to motion to limit this discussion to 2 minutes per people. We don't want to discuss this until 11:30, so if we can vote on that. Yes.
Okay, do we have a second? All right. You already kind of motivated. Is there, yes?
I was seconding my placard up this week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you motivated. Yes, Rory?
I've been on CSU now for 2 years. I have never once, and I'd like to say I attend most meetings. I've never once seen this number of members at large at a council meeting. So I'm sorry, but we've had council meetings with just councilors and executives that have gone till 2 a.m. and we know that's an issue. We've tried to stop it, but this is the one time that we have members at large in the room and we're trying to limit discussion for them. I am so sorry, but especially with this issue of elections being one of transparency and secrets being kept and students getting involved, I think limiting discussion is literally the worst thing we could do. It is an insult to everyone who's showed up here. If I have to sit here until 2 a.m., I will sit here until 2 a.m. as your counselor, as a representative for you, to listen to what you have to say. I owe that to you. I think the rest of us do as well.
Thank you. Rowan?
I think the issue, it's not about limiting who can speak, it's limiting the amount of time that someone can speak, to be clear, is what the motion is doing. And I think the issue is that if we're here till 1 a.m., which there's 60 people in the room, 50 people, I don't know, I can't really guess, but a lot of people in the room, if everyone talks for 10 minutes, this conversation isn't going to go anywhere. We're going to be here till 2, by which point everyone's too tired to think, by which point we're not going to get anything done. Like, to actually be effective, we can't have people speaking for 10, 15 minutes, like, all around the room. It's not going to go anywhere.
Thank you. Margot?
I'd like to have a conversation. A forum like this is, as we've seen in previous council meetings, it's not very great for debate or discussion, and generally promotes like hostilities and people feeling attacked, and Robert's Rules of Orders are very cold, and some people are really good at Robert's Rules and some people are not, and some people will talk for 15-20 minutes, and some people will not. And yeah, I'd like to hear some of the folks in the room who haven't spoken about like their concerns and if their concerns have been addressed. But also, I would definitely encourage everybody to reach out as individuals to council, to executives. I know that like that office can be intimidating. There's like a desk, but the receptionists are very nice, and the executives are very, very open to having dialogue with people. And there was definitely a breakdown in communication, but I think that's something that can be righted and made better. And I'm really excited that you all are here right now to like have this discussion. But I'd love to honestly not have it during council, so we can like actually get to know each other and have snacks, coffee. I need coffee.
Thank you. Okay, so we're speaking to the 2 minutes per individual. Shad?
I definitely think we should move to 2 minutes, because beyond that, like, we get the idea. If you're going on for 5-10 minutes, like, I'm not necessarily here to give you like public speaking skills or be your audience. So 2 minutes, and I move to like on the question, move to vote on the question.
You can't after having spoken, sorry.
Okay, I rescind what I said, then I just.
Nice try though. James?
Right, yeah, no, so I think it's a shame because all of the people here have a lot of concerns about the elections, and kind of limiting the amount of concerns that they can voice is somewhat problematic, especially since there's just by a glance more than 40 people in the room, and I think a lot of them have a lot to say. That's why they're here. This is the first time there's so many people at a CSU meeting. We don't even get that many counselors, right? We never even get the full set of counselors here. Now we have a full room of members at large. We should let them, we should hear them out. And it's especially not fair in the middle of a discussion to limit time. If we limited time at the beginning of the discussion, that would be one thing, but we're in the middle of the discussion. So I don't think it's fair to the people that haven't spoken yet and whose names are on the speakers list compared to the ones that just spoke prior.
Point of information?
You're next on the speaker list.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Well, I mean, didn't my fellow councilor limited time at the beginning of this council? And also, okay, I'm gonna wait for my speaking.
It is your speaker's turn.
Okay, well, I just feel like the concern, I've been heard. Like, we spent like 30 minutes on this at the beginning of the meeting. We've heard the concern, and now it's about addressing them. And there's no point of going on and on and on about like, I think we need to be concise to have an effective discussion. And please, the next person on the speakers list, call the question.
Thank you. Peter?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not going to call the question for this. Secondly, I have a few things that I think that I need to be said. First of all, just to address to the Victoria, who I think has just left, is basically what I want to say that it's not council's fault because
Right now we're just talking about the 2 minutes. So if you want to speak to that, that's fine, but you're on the speaker's list for the previous thing as well. So if it's about the 2 minutes, it's good, but if not, like if it's general comments, you're still on the list.
Like, I'm not going to like call the content for two minutes. There's no point of doing 2 minutes. People need to talk about this, and this need to be addressed. So it needs to be done.
Thank you. Victoria?
Thank you. So, first off, as it was mentioned previously by our counselor here, it is one of the first times that many of us have been here. So many students here wishing to have their concerns addressed, and I don't think that the speaker time should be limited because you have counselors who are walking in and out of the room, executives who have come in 40 minutes late, who are not here to like actually listen to the concerns of people who have been directly implicated in some of these concerns. So I really would appreciate if you allow us to speak, also just because it's what the students want is for their voices to be heard. And if you're just silencing us at a time where elections are happening and it's one of the most important aspects in a democratic procedure, if you're against democracy, then whatever, but I think we should have this to continue as a unlimited time. Thank you.
John?
Question.
Okay, do we have a
Point
second
of
for
order.
calling the question? Yes?
Hasn't the council already called the question?
No, he can't do it
I
after
didn't have a
speaking.
pen.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Peter specifically said I'm not calling the question. Do we have a second for calling the question? David? All right, all those in favor of calling the question, please raise your placards. Needs a 2/3. 13, all those opposed? 1, 2, and any abstentions? 0. All right,
Inquiry.
yes?
Isn't standing regulations, you have to like do like a roll call of who's here to see like absence?
No,
Or has,
no, a roll call is this beautiful
Alright.
creation here.
Because like, again, just because some executives were late who do have voting power, I don't know if they.
Executives don't have voting
Oh, they
power.
don't?
No.
Never mind, I received.
But good point of information. Right, so the question's been called. So all those in favor of limiting speaking turns to 2 minutes, please raise your placards. 8, all those opposed? 5, and any abstentions? Chris. Thank you very much. Yep, so it's 8, 5, 0. Ooh, I'm having a memory blank. I don't think that's a 2/3. Oh yes, it is a 2/3. In that case, limiting debate, 8/13. Does not carry. Let me do math for a second. Just so. There we go. Does not carry. It's 0.62. Okay. So in that case, debate is not limited, and we can go back to the original speakers list. Michelle.
Iverson.
Right. Jad.
Okay. Quick thing. Like I only wanted it to be 2 minutes because you can speak multiple times, not just once. So an idea can go for 2 minutes. Coming back to the elections, first of all, like, thank y'all for doing everything that you've done. And like, I thought my elections was hard until I saw what you guys had to go through. So like, we definitely empathize with you guys, and it's very unfortunate what happened to you. Nonetheless, I don't think it's a good idea that we all gather, and then we have like, you guys are angry at us or like everyone, and then counselors are angry at executives for not doing their job. So it's more like everyone's just trying to throw the blame at the other person. And so looking at what happened with the elections, we kind of have to move on, because the thing about, you're gonna realize that once you get elected, it's like the thing about Robert's rule is if you don't if you don't move on with like recommendations and solutions right away, like these things will never get passed. And so at this point, it's like the CEO definitely made a lot of mistakes when it came to the execution of the elections, but at the same time, we can't necessarily blame her because she didn't get the appropriate training that she should have. And that's something that we definitely have to look for when it comes to whether it's the election committee or the policy committee, to include things like, for example, why didn't the old CEO train the new CEO? Where's this guy? Or the fact that we're bringing in CEOs to elections that don't necessarily understand the culture of Concordia, understand the policies that we follow, and understand the requirements that we need for elections to be successful. And so knowing that she didn't get, or they didn't get the training that was required for them to have a successful election, the CEO definitely can't be like, they can't necessarily be held responsible for that, but at the same time, I definitely see some like cuts in their compensation for some of the things that they should have been doing that they didn't do. That is if it's up to council to decide. Now when it comes to the executive team, whether they did do some illegal campaigning from their personal emails or not, I'm pretty sure there's a committee somewhere in Concordia that will decide whether that was against the order, against regulations or not, and we should definitely mandate that responsibility to them because we don't have time for that here. On another note, if it comes to the elections, one way to make it better is, first of all, make sure that your CEO is well trained, whether it's things like we have to start including things like a harassment policy when it comes to the executive team. Because not only did I hear from the CEO herself that she felt very attacked and very intimidated, but also from my personal experience, running, whether it was for us or for CSU, it has always been very hard. You always feel like you're isolated, you always feel like the other candidates are constantly trying to disqualify you for some reason, as if this was like some Fortnite game, I don't know, but like, at the end of the day, like, it's not a question of like what happened, but more so like how can we like improve so that these things don't happen again, right? If we don't start looking into a harassment policy when it comes to our elections, people are not going to run anymore. And trust me, like, I'm pretty sure like 89.5% of us here can attest to the fact that at one point during these elections, you did feel harassed. And like some other candidates were harassing you one way or another. Whether I went from my class, I'll never forget this, ASFA elections, from the hall building entrance to my class, I passed by the polling clerks and I get 8 complaints to the CEO, right? So this attitude is an attitude that we have to change, because at the end of the day, this is a democratic process. Like, it's the one right that we get as citizens, not only of like Canada, but also at Concordia. This is our money at the end of the day. And it's like, we have to ensure that the people that are coming into this understand what this is like, the millions of dollars that we approve, the budgets that we approve every year. And so you look at it and you're like, what's most likely gonna happen in 5 years? Are our elections gonna be something that is gonna define the university experience or not? Because student politics at Concordia right now is filthy, is dirty, is messy. People do very bad things to get to these positions that you're not even paid for, by the way, like chill. And at the end of the day, when you go to your boss to get a job because you think that this CSU is gonna get you like some career or something, your job's gonna look at you, your boss is gonna look at you and be CS who, like who, what is this? And so we have to look at things like online voting. We have to look at things like it's unacceptable, even though my fellow CSU colleague member of whatever said $60,000 were not spent, but looking at the standardized way of how we do elections, they're going to be spent in future years. We're going to spend the 60K every year because we need those things. We need security. For example, if we look at alternative methods of voting, such as online voting maybe.
Sorry, no campaigning.
Oh yeah, my bad. Okay. Alright, this is it. For the CEO, like, at the end of the day, we're all students here, like, calm down. This is maybe a multi-million-dollar company, but it's still a student union, okay? So, don't bash on each other as much, and like, if you're gonna say something moving forward, at least at the end of it, make sure you have 1 or 2 solutions, right? The CEO messed up somehow. It wasn't necessarily all her fault because she didn't get enough training. So let's get them the training that is required. Let's go talk to Election Quebec. Let's get a committee to Concordia. Let's get someone that we pay for every year to train these people if it's not the CEO that was there before. Because no one knows how to run an election like a CEO that has already done it in the past, right? So whether it's for the CEO, whether it's for the executive team, a lot of the policies that we're trying to install here are simply inefficient because they don't reach their objectives the way we want them to. So like when we tell the CEO like, have an election in 2 days, by the way, for like 30,000 students, the simplest thing, those voting ballots that you were talking about, I don't know who earlier, it's like, of course they were black and white, but like if you look at last year, they were all colored. There was like different colors for every department, whatever, arts and science, engineering. But then looking at her, she had no way of finding out because the last CEO didn't tell her, hey, by the way, go to this company, not this, because this one's cheaper, this one's more expensive. This is how you cut with costs, right? You can't expect someone that doesn't know how to do their job to take this job so fast. Nonetheless, they still made some mistakes and they still should pay for these mistakes, and that's where the compensation talk is going to come very soon, right? But when it comes to things like your experience overall, what guarantees a council member that wants to guarantee the continuity of the CSU? And I think that's the major problem that we're facing here, is that every year we have these CSU executives that come in after a CSU team, and it's like there's no transition between the two. There's no plan of like, hey, by the way, last year we hired the CEO around that time, so maybe you should look into hiring a CEO around that time as well. So the continuity not only of the CSU, of Council of the Executives, but also of the CEO. So when you do these things, it's like you start implementing a certain culture in your election process that will promote students to, like, that will encourage students to vote more, whether it's like you using different methods or whatever, that's something that we can discuss later, but also about making sure that this culture that you're installing is one that encourages people to participate in this democratic process. Like at the end of the day, we represent like, what, 30,000 students, and then participation is at all-time low, and we have all these problems every year with the CEO. Every year there's problem with every CEO, like whether it's ASFA, CSU, whether it's I don't know, every election I've heard about has never been a good experience. Personally, I'm gonna start, like, I haven't had a very good experience. I don't know about y'all, but like I'm pretty sure we can all attest to it, and that's something that we actually have to look forward to, and we have to we actually have to work on it, because if we don't change it, people are gonna get discouraged, and if you discourage people from a democratic like listen y'all, like I'm from Lebanon, right? I don't have a democratic process in my university. I don't have like, oh, this person like harassed me during election period. I don't have that, right? We have this great privilege of living in this beautiful country that takes the voting right, the most democratic, most sacred right that as a citizen you get. The one time you get to say what's on your mind is during the voting period. And if the CSU creates a culture, creates an environment that enables the positivity of democracy, that's when, at the end of the day, people are going to want to be part of the CSU. They're going to want to learn what the CSU is. They're going to want to know more about the CSU. Of course, a lot of the students today don't know about the CSU, but that's because a lot of them are not even interested in it. There's a difference between the two. You can't expect you can't expect Sophie and everyone else to go around to every student and say, hey, y'all, do you know what the CSU is? Like, knocking on doors at night, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But how do you encourage people to be part of your democratic process is by showing them how easy it is to go, to run for an election, and then to follow certain policies, certain rules. And that's something we also have to look at. When does campaigning really have to end? When does the voting period really have to be? Does it have to be 2 days, or can it be a whole week? Like, how do we have to look at the fundamentals of the election process at Concordia, because after 4 years of doing this, it has been nothing but hell. And it's like, if we don't start working on it, like now we're all sitting here, we're chill, like, well, I got elected, I'm fine, I don't care. But like, it's not good, because you take this culture, you go to your workplace, and it's the same thing. You go to your school, and it's the same thing. But it's like, the CSU has to be the role model for all these member associations, all these clubs, all these federations, and it's like, it has to start with the CSU. You're looking at CASA, you're looking at JMSB, you're looking at ASFA, it's like, they're trying, they're going out of their capacity to like try and change their election process to have more representation, right? But it's like the CSU has to look at the policies that will shape the election process for the next, not year, not 2 years, legit for the past 10 years. Because, why? People are not running anymore, people are not voting anymore, people hate this. And it's like, at one point they can have a referendum and just take away all of our money. That's not good, because all what we're trying to do here is do good for the students, do good for you guys, for everyone here, for the people that are not in CSU to know that it's like, don't say they didn't do the work that they were supposed to do. Don't say that, because everyone knows that a CSU executive, yeah, is paid, but like compared to the work that they have to do, y'all, like it's not a fun job, and it's like having to hear people saying, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't do that. Well, of course, time management is the answer, right? Allocating responsibilities is the answer. But a strong council means a strong executive, right? United, what was that manual? United we stand, divided we fall. But like, yeah.
I don't want people in the room to think I'm leaving because I don't want to hear what has to be said. I just have to go to the washroom, so I'm going to be like 5 minutes. Just let everybody.
Thank you. Around 9 or 8:30, we can take a little break if everyone's amenable to that.
Just have a point of information.
Yes.
So you mentioned something that I think is going to come up and that other candidates have also mentioned. The current numbers that are out there are, not necessarily wrong, but regarding the CEO salary, regarding the DEO salary, it's not $11,000 that we are paid. It's about $2,000. It's actually a little less than $2,000. And also, it's not like a fixed amount that is given. We're getting paid by the number of hours we do. So let's say in total on my contract I only do 40 hours of work. I'm only going to get paid for 40 hours of work out of that $2,000. Just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
Still getting a cut.
Are you good, Chad?
Yeah. Like,
Okay.
cut her compensation, let's change the policies, make them nicer, make them more friendly, put a harassment policy when it comes to elections, make sure your CEO's trained, make sure you bring in someone from outside of Concordia to train the CEO to understand what we need, make sure that you have a plan, make sure that CEO, the executives, when you leave your positions next year and there's incoming executives, make sure you tell them, hey, by the way, election happens these 2 days, you're going to want to do this before this date, you're going to do this before this date, so we make sure that we hire a CEO before the date is due, and when it comes to council, like, let's start showing up more to support the executives more, you know, like, stuff like that, and just like, you see, maybe you should have done the 2 minutes.
Can you write this down and send it to me, please? Because I can't.
You don't
Somewhere there.
Okay, order, please. There's still a speakers list to get through. Peter?
Okay. So I have a few things that I need to be addressed. First of all, this is not something that council should be blamed for, because literally there's a few council who are here today that are suggested yesterday as a consultation to try to either do this booking period for 2 days or 3 days, with the exception that we might have a day that we are lack of police stations and so on, but it's just the whole executive is trying against this. And also something that I want to address is that this semester up to this point there's a few counselors, including myself, who has been really tried to be kicked out by executive due to whatever reason there is, and even this executive who trying to add name like other people to the elections in order to help someone out of the whole thing. That's the 2 points that I want to make. The third thing that I want to say that right now in FAR there's a whole big problem with FAR that fine art people, students, I just don't really trust on CSU. And like there's literally not so many fine students who would really want to either get involved or be participating in any way to help the CSU to bring stuff out. And this is really bad. And I mean, we see that there's a potential with this year's election that we can try to bring this number up, but now the whole election is getting postponed, which will for sure decrease the whole thing on front, which I really hope that we need to figure out the solution on this, how we can bring people up, how we can bring each faculty people back together to vote on this, to vote on referendum question or even other stuff. And the last thing that I want to say is that the OCO should not be against, because it's not her fault. That whole meeting on the testimony with the OCO should not be happening at all, but for some reason that meeting was being held, and there's no other way that we can do this right now. And I just don't see how the new deal would really be able to work. And like I just think that we need to figure out a solution on this, and the conflict impact that we have right now on sales should not be happening like this at all.
Thank you. Samantha? Sorry.
First of all, I would like to begin with a statement on me calling the meeting regarding the CEO. I would not have made a meeting if I was basing it on hearsay without enough concerns addressed to me that it becomes legitimate, and without collecting evidence that would also legitimize these concerns, which I did go out and collect. It was never my intention to call a meeting to intimidate the previous CEO, for which I sympathize with their concerns. It was never my intention for me to remove them either. We are supposed to collaborate, and we are supposed to collaborate on efficient solutions as to what to do. That was the point of the meeting. I cannot say more because it was closed session, but understand those intentions. Secondly, every decision made after the quitting of the previous CEO up until the election of the new one was done in private consultation, yes, but everything was done with the participation of the councillors. Nothing was done behind closed doors, nothing was done in secrecy. We approved the process, and it also says in the standing regulations, 7.14, it says that the executives can use an executive decree in times of emergency. That is allowed, and because of the fact that we can only call meetings within a certain time frame, I believe it is 5 days, it would be better, in our opinion, to hire and work on finding another CEO as soon as possible than to tell the candidates and the students, sorry, you're in limbo until we figure out what to do. We're running on your time, I agree, we're running on money, and the fact is, it is better to have somebody come in who is qualified to do the job and is qualified enough to run it, than it is to tell you, well, we'll let you know in 5 days when we make a meeting if enough people come and if we get quorum. Third of all, the whole point of ensuring an efficient election is so that it can be done to the best of one's abilities. I sympathize with the new CEO, and this job is definitely not easy. It is hard to pay attention to detail. Within everything you say and do, there are details to it. And those details need to be adhered, and those details need to be verified for accuracy. What they do is extremely difficult. Everything they do within that job is walking on eggshells. Should one thing go wrong? Should they say something going wrong? Have sympathy with the fact that this is not an easy task. It doesn't mean that more training is not needed. It doesn't mean that things didn't go wrong. Those two are very valid claims, and it should be decided upon whether it should be done through an external training session, or perhaps we could appoint an older, qualified, approved old CEO to give the training as an honorarium. This measure has been used in different contexts in the CSU, and I believe that it could be efficient as well in this context. Lastly, concerning the emails about the referendum questions and this claim of foul play, this needs to be discussed in council. These need to be circulated so that everybody can have fair access, because I didn't see what happened and I don't know. But I did go through the standing regulations and I did go through the bylaws. The only things that are there concern candidates and concern fair play. Moreover, concern fair play on positions. I haven't found anything on referendum questions. However, it is obviously common sense that things should be done with fair play and things should not be done to the personal detriment of other people. So first of all, it needs to be found if there is an actual policy on this matter, and secondly, it should be evaluated whether this is bad enough to call for more attention on the matter. And that's my speaking time. Thank you. Margot?
Whereas prospective candidates have voiced significant concerns about the CSU elections process, whereas policy has given suggestions to other autonomous groups such as the Judicial Board, whereas we can't hash this out in this meeting, whereas the current CEO is very qualified and still has had situational difficulties with the job, be it resolved that Policy Committee draft possible training manuals for the CEO, including ballot design, email response time expectations. Be it further resolved that past and present CEOs be consulted on this training manual, and be it further resolved that the current candidates for council seats are emailed for their opinions on possible ways to resolve this in the future.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Rory, your motivation, Margot?
Let's get something done here. Let's be productive. I think we've played the blame game enough. The CEO needs a way to be trained that doesn't directly implicate the executives. Let's make this better for next year. Let's make this better for our general elections. And I want everyone's opinions to be heard. I want everyone to feel a little bit like less stressed than I'm feeling right now. Let's do this in a way that's more conducive to solutions.
Thank you. Rory?
While I second it and I do support this motion, I would like to caution and give my opinion on fixing things for the future as an excuse for what's happened in the past. As I've said, I've been on CSU for 2 years. I've been on CASA before. Every time we have issues with elections, the answer, or every time we have issues with anything, the answer seems to be, let's send it to someone else to put forward a policy, put forward procedures, fix things up, and it seems to me like that's never done. I'm not, discounting this motion itself. We're trying to get something done. We're trying to, get procedures and get policies, put in place. But that was done last year. We had issues with elections last year. We went horribly over budget. We had issues with the CEO's conduct or things they did. And we said, oh, what's the answer? Well, we're going to do things for them, but we're also going to, put procedures in place for next time. Put policies in place for next time. It always seems, there's no personal attack in what I've said.
What is it?
Well, you're saying that like this has actually no teeth, and this is just
yeah,
like
that's,
No, that's
not
what
a
I'm
point
saying,
of
and
personal
that's a
privilege.
contextual comment, it's not a point of personal privilege at all. Your motion, once it's seconded on the floor, does not belong to you, so it's not about you, it's about the motion itself. I'll continue with my comments. I just don't want this to be taken as the excuse that seems to be given every time that, oh, send something to policy committee to draft X, Y, and Z. We never hear of it again, we never see it again. It may or may not ever be completed. Every time we have election issues, that's the go-to answer. No one ever takes responsibility. No one is ever held accountable for it. And while this is a moving forward good step, I think we just need to be cautious about using it as an excuse. So the TLDR, I support the motion, but I caution that it should not be an excuse.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah. So I like the motion. I've been wanting an elections guide for a very long time for every level of elections at Concordia because nobody's good at writing elections guidelines at this university. I would like to propose a friendly amendment to it, and that would be to add a deadline. The deadline, and basically to add in the clause to be presented on the last meeting of council for the 2018-2019 mandate. The reason I think we need a deadline is because if there isn't, we're just going to forget about it, and it's just never going to happen.
Okay, it needs a second first, though. Patrick? Okay, you kind of already motivated for it. It's a non-contentious issue. Is everyone okay with a deadline? Yes?
Can you repeat what that deadline was?
Presented at the last meeting of council of the 2018-2019 mandate.
Just at the latest.
It is contentious.
Okay, so in that case, I'll open the speakers list on the amendment.
So do I add that to the list?
No, it hasn't been officially. Rory?
My only concern with this is that if the original motion is to consult with past CEOs, I think like by the last meeting of 2018, that's like it may take a little bit longer to get feedback from old CEOs.
Yeah, respond to that.
No, it wasn't a question.
It's comments. Sorry.
Sophie?
Sorry.
Yeah, I would just like motivate for maybe adding the last meeting at the latest. That provides for a deadline that's binding, but it gives us time that if policy committee meets and they're able to, in conjunction, and reach out to people, and I do understand that it is often hard to chase down old CEOs, but this gives us a strict deadline. It can be done earlier if that's possible, but if not, there's that goal there, so that would be my suggestion to the floor.
Thank you. David?
I rescind.
Okay. James?
Yeah, so I call the question.
Okay. Do we have a second? Dad, is there any opposition to calling the question? Okay, so,
Point of information, is this for the amendment or for the entire motion?
no, it's the amendment that says the deadline is to be presented at the last meeting of council 2018-2019 mandate.
Okay.
Oh, isn't it at the latest?
No, because nobody actually amended it. Nobody. It wasn't official. All right,
It's a friendly amendment.
Sophie said I'm suggesting it. They,
Call it to question, we have to vote on what's there.
yeah. All right, all those,
Sorry,
yes?
just to understand, we're not allowed to vote on anything, we can just talk, is
Yes,
that correct?
yeah,
Okay,
that's it.
thank you.
It was seconded by James.
Who
Sorry,
seconded?
it was seconded by James. All right,
Oh, James called into question, so who seconded?
Jad.
Jad, okay.
All right, all good? Okay, so we all know what we're voting on. Okay, so it's the deadline is to be presented at the last meeting of council of the 2018-2019 mandate. All those in favor, please raise your placards. 15, all those opposed? 0. All right, so that carries, and we're back on the main speakers list of the motion, which was the one that Margot had read before. Speakers list is Jared, James, Princess, Camille, Artem, Sophie, Lee, Margot, Sophie. Jared.
Point of information.
Yes.
Sorry. Could the motion be repeated?
Yeah, Margot, can you repeat the motion, please?
Whereas prospective candidates have voiced significant concerns about the CSU elections process, whereas policy has given suggestions to other autonomous groups such as Judicial Board, whereas we can't hash this out in this meeting, whereas the current CEO is very qualified and has still had situational difficulties with the job, be it resolved that Policy Committee draft possible training manuals for the CEO, including ballot design and email response time expectations. Be it further resolved that the past and present CEOs be consulted on this training manual. Be it further resolved that the current candidates for council seats are emailed for their opinions on possible ways to resolve this in the future. And then be it further resolved that this be presented by the last meeting of the 2018-2019 mandate. Is that right?
I wasn't typing it down, but I think Kemi has it. Jared?
Yeah, I wanted to support this. To say, and also I want to say to the prospective candidates, a lot of us don't just sympathize, we empathize with what you're going through. In my first ever time I ran was last year's by-election, and I nearly lost my seat just due to a miscommunication between myself and the CEO. All that time, all that effort would have been for nothing. The winning of the seat democratically would have been for nothing. And we get it. You guys put a lot of time and you guys put a lot of effort into this. I went out, I voted yesterday on, 2 very, very, very important referendum questions that will shape the future of the CSU. That's for nothing now. My time and my money was wasted. So we aren't, this isn't just gonna point blame. This is gonna make sure that this stops happening because it has happened in the past. I've been affected. The current executives, they nearly unfairly lost their election and had to bring it to Judicial Board. So we get it. A lot of us have gone through putting all our time, putting all our effort in.
Order. How does this have anything to do with
I'm going to relate it.
Talking about the motion.
So I definitely support this because we have been in situations where it's like we put all this time and effort and then just because of something out of our control, we nearly lost it. This is a great step to making sure that there are rules set in place so that this stops happening because it needs to stop happening. This is a great step towards making sure that next year's by-elections, this year's general elections, etc., this can't happen again. This can't. I mean, I think everyone in this room, CEO, executive, councillor, or member at large can agree this can't happen again. No one likes the situation, no one. And this is a great way to make sure that moving forward, it won't.
Thank you. James?
I call the question.
Okay, do we have a second? Caleb. All right, all those in favor of calling the question, please raise your placards. 11, all those opposed? 1, okay, and abstentions.
I wasn't.
Sorry, 2. All right. Okay, so the question's been called, so we're voting on the motion that Margot had read out before. Is everyone okay with that? Okay, so all those, sorry.
Does anyone need me to reread it? Is everyone good?
Okay. Perfect. So all those in favor, please raise your placards. 14, all those opposed, 0. So that carries. All right, so with that, we are back on the main speakers list. And James.
Yes. So we've kind of talked a bit about a few potential solutions for future elections, but I don't think we've really talked about what can happen for this election that's happening right now. And I think that's something that's really important for people here to know. And I think it's really good that there are so many, well, less people now, but there's still a lot of people here. Let's use the market of ideas. There's about, almost 30, almost 40 people. Let's try to get solutions as to what to do now. Now, I think we can start off from a very reasonable base. And that very reasonable base is the fact that this election screwed up because of human factors. Let's try to let's just remove as many human factors from the equation as possible. Now, there are elections that are currently going on for ASFA that are going off without a hitch.
No campaigning.
I'm not campaigning. This is actually a solution for the January elections to push them online.
That would be campaigning.
No, that's not campaigning.
It's a referendum question on the ballot currently.
Well,
So
we
if
are
we could
talking
just,
about.
if there's no motion on the table, if we could just
Oh no, it's
avoid
part of the
speaking
motion.
in
Was the
favor.
motion not sent? Was the
No.
motion not sent to you about making it online?
Well, no, you have to read the motion,
You
and
have to
also
make
I
a
don't have
motion.
my email.
You gotta make a
with me.
motion if you're standing up.
Personal privilege.
Yes.
I am part of ASPA, and you don't know how online elections are going, so you can't speak about it right now.
Okay, so we'll take the topic off the table. Did you send it to my email?
Somebody should send it to you.
Well, someone has to read it. It's not a motion unless it's read. So right now you're just speaking.
All right. Either way, this is something that we should do, right? The second thing is we need to immediately resume the campaigning period, which has been suspended, because if we are either going to have, a month and a half to a break between the elections and now, and it's incredibly unfair to all of the candidates, right? And it's incredibly unfair to the CEO to try and monitor these secret conversations that will be happening, right? I don't think anybody in this room is under the impression that nobody will be talking about elections issues, especially because the election was cancelled. At the very least, they're talking about the election being cancelled,
Point of information?
right?
Yes.
This
You have
is-
a point of information?
Yes.
Or something about what James is saying, because that's two different things.
Well, I mean, it's kind of related to what he's saying, but it's also for information. I did state in the beginning that all the candidates will be contacted at the end of the meeting to specify what's going on with the campaign period.
Right. Thank you for the clarification.
I was at the meeting yesterday about the campaign period, and one of the reasons that we said that we couldn't extend the campaign period is because
Was
the
it the
campaign
meeting in
period
closed
was limited.
session?
Yes.
Was that in closed session?
The whole thing was.
No, the campaign period was limited in council. It's limited. It was limited in the thing. That was
Okay, parliamentary inquiry. Parliamentary
I
inquiry before it
wasn't there.
continues.
Yes.
I was
Okay, so
there.
so
and
whoever
I
was
asked,
there.
I called it, I asked
It was
if it was in
closed
closed session. I specifically said this because we wanted to make sure we're all on the same page with things before we put information out. And by information,
and
it
it was repeated several times.
All right, so we will presume it was in closed session. Continue, please.
Well, we need to extend. Either way, this was in the what is it? Was it the October meeting? The October meeting, we limited in council the campaign period to Monday, to end on Monday. So we have to in council resume campaign period because it was a council motion, right? So we have to right now, notwithstand the bylaws, because we voted in October in order to end the campaign period. So we have to, as council, today, vote to resume campaign period, right? And the second thing is we have to increase the budget of all of the campaigns, because they're going to have an extra month of campaigning. That's extra money spent on Facebook ads. It's extra money spent on various other things, posters, trying to get more time, resources that they need to purchase in order to extend their campaign by an extra month. We're going to have to increase that budget. So shoving those things onto the internet, resume immediately after resuming campaign period, because we need campaign period resumed so that the councillors aren't punished for speaking with their friends over a month and a half of break. Especially anybody else, because the moment that we've had you know, I've been accused of campaigning right now, even though this is actually a solution that I'm proposing to shut this online. So I don't think that's a fair comparison. We need this to happen now, and we need this to happen today. There's a motion that's being prepared. It's been sent, I believe. Somebody else, hopefully, that's aware of this motion can read it out loud when they get to it. I'm informing council that this is being written, and that's you know, for now that's it.
Thank you. Rowan?
Few things. One, just like a little bit of information for people who aren't aware. There's been discussions around the limitations of the CEO using staff. These are not things that were done by choice. This is like a bit unrelated to the conversation, but just to give context. We have a collective agreement with our staff. That means that there are limitations in how we can use them and how we can fulfill their jobs when they're not in the office. If we break this collective agreement, the union will sue us. We don't want that, so we have to follow the collective agreement, which limits a lot of things that the CEO can do and makes their job harder. But in the end of the day, we don't want to get sued. Where else was there? Like the campaigning period point, I think it's like, first of all, I believe it's the CEO's discretion, but I think like having a campaigning period makes sense. Having it over break makes very little sense in my mind. It advantages people who have the money to campaign for an entire month. It advantages people who are going to be staying in Montreal for the entire time. Like, to extend it for a month and a half is not a good idea. And also to try to make drastic changes, like we just had to have a standard we tried to have a standard election and it got messed up. To try to make drastic changes in like a month to have another election, like I'm not saying that we don't need drastic changes. I'm saying like we need to have an election, and our priority needs to be on having an election that is legitimate, having an election that is not compromised, and we can fix things, and that's very important, and I agree. But to try to make major changes for January is not going to go over well.
Thank you. Salman?
Yeah. Just a question to
Rowan.
Rowan. You don't want to make a drastic change in the election within a month, but you can do a lot of changes within a week, within 2 days or 3 days, and bring new CEO and wasting the time and the money, but you don't want to change it within a month of span of time, like to change like what James have said or anyone saying, like to bring like the campaign or the increasing the money, increasing the budget for the candidates. You cannot do that, but you guys have done the more drastic change within a week of last week of CEOs and electing and then resigning and then electing.
If I can respond. It was a question.
Yeah, it was a question.
Yeah.
It was an inflection.
Sorry, I don't
like
think it was an inflection.
I think there's differences in the style. First of all, we did not want to have to hire a new CEO the week before polling. That was not an ideal situation. Second of all, I think like small changes, things like let's say that there's another week of campaigning, increasing the budget. Yeah, that's a small change. That's fine. I think making drastic changes to how we do the elections, things that are going to need policy changes, things that are going to need technical changes, things that are going to need discussions with IITS or external corporations, like those massive changes that are going to take like structurally change how we do the elections are a completely different manner and are something that are trying to rush those through in a month is going to lead to a similar situation in 2 months' time where we're having another meeting like this because the by-elections again didn't go over well. And I think that there's an important difference there between like minor changes and things to reflect like the situation that we're in and the structural changes that need to be done in the future. And I think that there's a difference in what we can and can't do for the January election.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I guess there's two pieces to the motion we're debating. I wanted to move to online voting for January.
There's no motion.
There's no motion.
There's no motion, okay. So James
There's nothing on the table.
Okay, so just my turn on the speaking list, just in general, but based on the whole thing. Okay. In that case, cool. There was a lot of comments made. First of all, I just want to say that attempting to put all of the blame on one party is not going to be effective. So this is why it's important that we actually own up to the mistakes we've made as an executive. We've done that in our statement. It's a fact. The CEO was hired too late, and that led to a lot of errors being made in the timeline. We are responsible for that. So, just want to put that out there. Based on that same error, I would ask that folks in the room be a little bit more forgiving of the errors that were made by the two CEOs. Being in a situation where they have not a lot of time and a lot going on, even the most competent person is going to make oversights and logistical errors. So just on their behalf of Claire and Victoria, we can acknowledge the mistakes, but be a little bit more forgiving of things. Point of empathy, please. I just want to speak to that. I think both Victoria and Claire have done the best they can with the situation they were given, and I do thank them for the work they put in. I guess there's a lot that has come up. Some of the things I've been working on just today is putting together budget actuals so far, so to know how much has been spent on this by-election, how much it's going to cost us to postpone it, as well as I guess considerations around difference in the campaign period. The CSU's budget is set in June. It sets budget lines for every department for the year. What we set was $72,500 to be spread across 2 elections, the by-elections plus the general elections in the winter. And what my job was once the CEO got hired, I would sit down with them and take that $72,500, allocate it across 2 different budgets, and then the CEO would then go about implementing that budget. The budget itself would be drawn up based on past experiences. So I've looked at the transaction lists from our last elections. However, the last CEO was not very good at any form of record keeping, including his election budget. So this year it was made from scratch, although I think we did the best job we could. So just to get a sense of what the costs are projected for this year. The numbers you might have seen float around Spotted Concordia are not accurate. They were based on some projected expenditures from the last election, which was done by a CEO that did major cost overruns. So again, I would just say Spotted Concordia is not a news source. Please be skeptical of what gets put up there. Based on my conversation with Victoria, the last CEO, we're projecting a budget for the 2018 by-elections of around $35,800. So that was if everything went according to plan, no hitches, all the things basically hit our targets. The big items, of course, the largest expenditure would be security. We got the bill of that for 3 days, 13 guards, 13 hours a day, at $35 an hour, came to a whopping $17,000. Not pretty. After that, you get the salaries for the poll clerks. So we have 20 clerks, or enough hours for 20 clerks to do a full day. So they end up hiring more poll clerks. That was 39, but they didn't. Not all 39 poll clerks would have been there for all the full day. So it adds up to enough hours for 20 people across 10 tables. And those people make $15.44 an hour. The CEOs and the DEOs earn a salary of $16.50 an hour. So again, it's based on the number of hours they work. It's not just a set salary. Just to get a sense of what to expect, we budget roughly $2,000 for 3 weeks full time for the CEO. And Victoria thought that because it was a short-term election, they'd hire a few more DEOs than normal. So it'd be 3, and the collective salaries would be about the same as the CEO. So there's another $2,000 there. Plus there's a few things here and there to reimburse the candidates for their election expenses, space rentals, which was estimated at $120 across the 3 days. We had to rent laptops from IATS, came in at $600, plus their printing costs, which seems to have varied wildly between what was expended in the last election in the winter, when it came to almost $3,000 from Rubik's. But this time around, it was the projection came in much lower, around $550. So I don't know quite how to explain that discrepancy there, but that's what was budgeted. The actuals are still, should be understood as to be in flux. I'm still getting invoices, I'm still negotiating with administration around some of the cancellations to get the final fees. Are we going to be paid for just that 1 day, a day and a half? So that is still not completely final across every line. So please understand these are the best numbers I have at the moment, but are subject to change. The total is about $15,600 so far. That's where we're at. Okay. It's assuming that we're not having to pay for more than 1 day of security. We're going to cut back on the laptop rental costs, space rental costs, and the salaries for the poll clerks, which I consulted with folks at Hojo today around the workers' rights issues and labor standards issues, which because they defined as superior force as the reason for cancellation of the elections, we're not required to pay the poll clerk salaries for the remainder of the period, but whether or not we should or how much is a discussion that still has to be had. But at this point, and at least I know that we're not required to pay them. So I can share this with anybody who wants it, but that's sort of where we're at budget-wise. Extending the campaign period, I do have concerns with that idea around budget perspectives because extending the campaign period requires a CEO to monitor campaigning activities, and that means about 6 weeks worth of salary. So from a budget perspective, that kind of makes me uncomfortable. Not to mention the fact that having run an election myself and hating it every day, 6 weeks of campaigning is a hell I wouldn't wish on my enemies. Okay, I'm really glad that Jad brought up the question of harassment. Again, to speak about my own election period was miserable. That was literally my first experience with anything CSU. Back in February, a bunch of strangers said, hey, do you want to run with me? I said yes for some reason, and I was thrown into that fire. This is definitely something that needs to be talked about on an ongoing basis because what happens in Concordia Student Union elections should not be understood to be normal. The way people treat each other here is awful, okay? I'm really, really happy Jad brought that up. Training of the CEOs, of course, is really important. The fact that last year's CEO was if there's a thing that could have went wrong, he did it wrong, and aggressively wrong, to the point where like all throughout the summer and throughout even the start of campaign period, we're always finding new Nicholas Roberts surprises. Right down to the fact that he left his moldy shoes in the campaign office all summer, it stunk, to different budget surprises, to lack of records kept. Do you know that last year's by-elections, so the 2017 by-elections, there was no CEO report filed. So you don't actually have records on how many votes were cast, what the referendum questions were. Did you know that? Thanks, Nicholas Roberts. So like, this is the infrastructure for election that we inherited. We definitely could have and should have made more and earlier efforts to prepare things. I'm just sharing this in the interest of transparency, just so you know exactly what happened and you can decide how to hold me and us accountable for that. That's information you have now. There were comments brought up about me personally as my role as referendum chair on the CSU question about using my personal email for campaign purposes. That's actually required. I'm actually not allowed to use any CSU resources for campaigning purposes. So if I had used my business email for referendum purposes, that would have been problematic. Use my personal Gmail to send emails to the CEO or whoever about campaigning issues. That's appropriate. So I just want to comment on that piece. I've used only my own email, and that was the appropriate thing to do per the elections bylaws. I'm really concerned with what Rory mentioned about ballots being left on tables and student ID being visible. That is part of why the decision had to be made to annul the election, because that level of, so not annul, postpone. The elections are not cancelled, they're postponed. That's absolutely unacceptable. People are right to be mad. We are mad. If you're not mad, you should be mad. I just want to agree with Rory that is absolutely unacceptable. I would appreciate some direction from councillors and others about what to do with the poll clerk's pay, because I'm in a position where I have to choose between being perceived as wasting students' money on election work that didn't happen versus students that were expecting to get paid. So I only see wrong choices, but I'd like to make a less wrong choice, and I would really appreciate some guidance on this. Folks have spoken about the CEO not communicating with candidates following the resignation, following the new hiring. I know a little bit about some stuff that's happening there. Victoria had actually directed the DEOs not to communicate with the candidates until more information was decided, and also directed the DEOs not to work as a team during the interim period between the two CEOs. I had asked her about that, why that wasn't communicated to candidates. She felt that where she had resigned, it wouldn't be appropriate for her to be using the CEO email. Again, that's just information you have, you can make your own decisions. That is what I was told by Victoria. Just so you're aware of.
Oh, sorry, could you just repeat the last thing you said?
Yes, so Victoria told me that she did not communicate with the candidates about her resignation because she felt it would be inappropriate. It would be inappropriate for her, no longer being the CEO, to use that email account, and directed the DEOs not to say anything. I can't speak for decisions that might have been made by Claire in the period following that. This is just what I was told by Victoria myself. I'm not issuing judgment, I'm just giving that as information so folks know. What else did I mention? People have mentioned some ideas about docking CEO pay. I just want folks to be mindful of contracts and labor law, not necessarily possible under Quebec Labour Code standards to do that. There might be other ways to talk about it if that's the direction we want to go in, but just keep in mind that having an understanding of hours, or amount paid for hours worked under a contract, the hours up to this point have been paid. There are legal requirements we must fulfill to an extent. Just be aware of those as discussions go forward. If there's anything else, I can obviously answer them, but I think that's all I'm going to say for now.
Was it a question for John? Oh, okay, yeah, you're on the speakers list. Kemi? Oh, sorry, do you have?
Am I still on speaker list?
Yeah, you are. Yeah. Kemi?
Yeah, I would agree that I would like to have some direction in terms of the field work and in terms of the CEO pay. I'm also very uncomfortable having pays ducked, especially considering that many associations around Quebec are now going on strike to be paid for their internship, and it's something that we have talked about at the CSU, and now we're just talking about having someone pays duck for mistakes that I feel have been very clear over the meeting, that we're lacking of training, and that's that. But yeah, so please motion, guidance, that will be very appreciated. In terms of campaigning, that also comes with the idea of having the CEO. For a campaign to happen, you need a CEO in order if there's this complaint or if there is regulations that are not followed, or in general if you have questions. So in that case, if you were to extend campaigning, which I mean personally, more politics is great, but you need to pay those people, and you need to think about how this is going to go forward in passing through the year until the election. So it's something to think about. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Did you just have a question for John?
Yeah, because I thought is that what we're interested
Was it a point of information? Or?
It was regarding just the logistics of something he said, because you mentioned that the ballots that were left on the table were the reasons why the elections were postponed, but the ballots were made public after the elections were postponed. So were you guys aware that they were left on the table, or was it? Because that that's what you had said. You said so. I just wanted clarification.
Not what I was trying to say. There was a number of reasons why I felt that the integrity of that vote was being compromised. I think saying that I think that feeds into reason. I was actually not present at the discussion with councillors about postponing the elections at all. I was in an exam at the time, so I actually wasn't present during that discussion. But I think that is a good reason why people might think that yesterday's vote would have been compromised. I think it's a very legitimate concern.
Can I just answer that concern as I was there? So regarding the ballots left on the table, that happened after we postponed the elections. So basically what happened is we came to the agreement of postponing the elections. I was working on a statement with Davis, I think. While we were working on that, the information got leaked somehow. So I contacted the DEOs to immediately tell them that tell the information to the clerks that they could go home, that they could just pack up everything in the boxes, bring boxes to the security, and then they were free to go home. Somehow, for some reason, some party clerks decided to just leave everything on the table and leave. This was not what was told to them to do. And anyway, they were clearly told to pack everything and bring to the security. In this case, we're probably going to try to find who were the polling clerks responsible for that. And if they want to be rehired during the January by-elections, they probably won't be, because this is a severe breach of everything, the bylaws and just identity and everything. So basically, this was not like ordered at any point by anyone. It was just like some polling clerks who did not follow the instructions properly, which is very sad and very upsetting. That's that.
Thank you. David?
First off, I want to really thank the candidates for their perseverance with this whole ordeal. But obviously, this issue could have been much prevented. Now, I want to explicitly say I'm not campaigning. This is actually a motion that for the next elections, we do have a motion to have an online option, so that if an issue like this arises, at least we'll have the online option still there rather than just the ballot system. That's it.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yeah. Amendment.
I motion to have an online voting option as well as the ballot option.
Okay. All right, Michelle? Was that a second? Sorry.
It's an amendment. Sorry, I don't remember the procedure. Do I have to second it?
Well, it has to be seconded first. Sorry. So yeah, go ahead. It's actually David speaking rights first, though.
Oh yeah, after motive. So yeah, I mean, obviously after everything that happened, it's clear that having an online option would facilitate everybody's lives and give that option to students who, for example, might not even have class those 3 days. They'll still be able to put their voice in, which for me, that's the whole purpose of a democratic system, is to be able to vote as comfortably as you can. So that's kind of it.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, I would just like to amend that to an online voting system that's independent from any university administration.
Okay.
Friendly amendment.
Sorry?
So do you mean something like simply voting, or do you mean not going through my Concordia, Astro, and Casa all the time?
Can you just repeat that, sorry?
So I'm just asking, do you mean not going through my Concordia through their voting portal system that has been done for AFSA and CASA, and using something like simply voting as an example?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Do we have a second for the motion?
I have a
The amendment? Yes.
I want to know, is it the motion, is it for this election going on, or is it for the general election?
The one that was stated was for January, correct, David?
Yeah.
Yes, so we need a second for the amendment, which was to amend to have it state an online voting system independent of any university administration. Rowan, your speaker's rights, Michelle?
We want our election system to be as secure as possible. There are organizations that the Elections Committee has started to look into that do this specifically, and we would like to be sure that our elections aren't tampered with by the administration.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, so I think it's entirely reasonable if if we kind of make this as a mandate of one of the things that the CEO has to do, right? To find that we're going to have online voting, because I don't think, because the CEO is going to be gone, we're going to have to appoint a new one. That's a lot of work that we're going to have to do, and honestly, over winter break, we have to kind of minimize the human factor. And I think online voting in general is a good idea. And if there's a concern that there might be tampering if you use My Concordia, I think it's manifestly reasonable that we, do this. Worst case scenario, it works as a trial run for the stuff.
Just so we don't spend hours on this, is there any opposition to the amendment? Okay, so we'll keep on the speakers list with Chris, John, and then Rory. Chris?
I rescind.
Okay, John?
Yeah. The reason why I think if we're going to go online is to do it separately from an admin-based system is part of the same reason why for so long we've had to have security guards monitoring our ballot booths. Even the paper ballots in student unions aren't that uncommon in Canada, but security guards being present for it is uncommon, and that's owing to Concordia's special culture. There is a history of election tampering and corruption in the CSU and at Concordia in general. This is part of why students have demanded accountability and distance of the elections officers from council and executives. That's part of why the tradition of getting security guards is there. This is why we can't have nice things, should be the motto of the CSU, honestly. So I do support having it separate in that sense. The separation from administration is very important if you know the CSU's history. And this is a story that I actually learned from, of all people, Lev Buckman, CEO of Student Care, our health plan. But between 2003 and 2009, did you know the Concordia Dean of Students Office gave about $25,000 a year towards candidates of a particular political persuasion to run election campaigns quietly for themselves through the year, get themselves reelected and their friends reelected year to year. It was only in the late 2000s when the Dean of Students changed over, said, "We're doing what?" and stopped making these payments to this group of students. The students got desperate. They went to the health plan company saying, "We're in negotiations this year. Give us $25,000 or we'll pick someone else." And he leaked that to the media. It was blown up. So there is a real and recent history of administration tampering in our elections. That is why that level of distance is important. Online voting can be done, but it's important that the independence of the union is upheld because this history is not that long ago.
Thank you. Robert?
Yeah, I have a couple concerns. One, I think that a lot of the benefits of online voting that have been discussed, one of the reasons why, people are saying that we should do it. Actually, no, I mean, my firm stance is that we should be doing it. So the benefits for it, the reasons why we should be doing it, I believe are negatively affected if we choose a service other than My Concordia. The fact that elections will be cheaper. If it's My Concordia, they're very cheap. If we go with a third-party service, we have to pay. When I was on CASA, when I implemented online voting on CASA, we looked at the alternatives. We costed out the other alternatives, and they were in the thousands, the tens of thousands of dollars for an election of that size, for 9,000 people. To have it coordinated through a third party was going to be very, very expensive. To do it with My Concordia is not free, but it's an already built-in system. I personally, and as a counselor, I haven't seen any evidence of the admin tampering. I don't think that right now, this year, currently, there's that much of a risk of tampering. I also think it would be a huge issue if they did. My Concordia is run through IITS. It is a separate department. We can pay for someone at IITS so that there's sort of a limitation to the conflict of interest. But it's like, how would the admin tamper in the elections? In a way that someone couldn't tamper in the elections with a ballot. It's the same type of thing. We leave our ballot boxes outside of the office. We hire, we hire Concordia Security. Like, there's no limitation to the admin influencing our elections. I think the main benefits of doing it online, period, are only there if we do it through My Concordia. Other elections that have been done through My Concordia, CASA's elections, they're our track record of success. So that's why I think this amendment is just, it's unnecessary.
Thank you. Patrick?
Honestly, I'm a 50-50 on this. I'm not gonna lie. I have talked in the past in September to a few companies, Simply Voting being one of them. And I do have their security audits. They've been very transparent with me. And the guy gave me a good 30-minute phone call back in September. And so I can speak in favor of that for an outside company. So long as the security, that they're transparent about their security procedures, I think we should do it. But when it comes to My Concordia, I have no opinion on it. Honestly, I think there's been a ton of human error in this election, and so I really I'm going to just honestly, I can't endorse either, but I think either case, I think it could work out. So that's what I was just gonna say.
So I guess my question is this realistic to do within a month? There's winter break happening. Also, who would be responsible for this? And I'd really kindly ask counselors and maybe people in the room if you want. We have work plans. We have very busy schedules. These were approved by council. This would totally derail a lot of things. I'm so in favor of elections being accessible, democratic, easy, but in a month, that's a lot to say, and I can predict more issues if we're already having issues with our current system that we're supposed to know. So I guess, is this realistic? I know a few people have implemented it before, and maybe they could very briefly talk about how long it took them to do that, and who would be responsible for implementing this, because it is a lot of work, and there is winter break happening, and there's current agendas, meetings, things already scheduled.
Did you have a point of information?
Yes, it was kind of building on that. I was going to ask, how long did it take to implement the CASA online voting?
You want to? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, my partner and I sat down with IITS. It took us a couple weeks. We put forward like an example, what do you call it, like a dry run to show our board of directors to do. It was very easy to go between Dean of Students to get the list, to go to IITS that already had student IDs in the system, and for them to program for it to be open for student IDs to go in and vote. The part that actually took the most time was literally sitting with IITS and writing out with them what the actual question on my vote would look like, and like just the wording of, you know, is it a radio box, is it, you know, check, is it an open text for people to put like input. It did not take that long, and if I had to do it again, that would be the easiest way to do it.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so feasibly, now that the system is already, like, the little work that had to be done is already done, how could this derail for months and months? I really don't see how this could take so long and be so costly to implement. Like,
Sorry, it's not really a question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I know you had a follow-up question.
My
Chad?
bad.
Sorry? Yes, we are. So that's the My Concordia or University Administration thing. Chad?
So I'm definitely in favor of having online voting in January, because it shows a certain change in attitude that the CSU is willing to look within itself and try to improve using new different methods onto how to improve our election process. Now, whether we want to do it with an external company or with Concordia itself, I actually think it's much better if we do it through My Concordia, and the reason for that is, first of all, it's much easier for us it's much easier for students to vote, since they're already like familiar with the platform. They already have a sense of what it is. Not to mention that the Concordia, the platform is not one of the most sophisticated platforms I've seen, so I'm pretty sure adding a little box with that voting wouldn't be that hard. And I know that ASFA did it not too long ago, and that didn't take them a lot of time, so it's definitely feasible when it comes to that. We do have an election committee in this council, and I definitely think it'd be a good idea if potentially we would give that responsibility or that task to install online voting by January to that committee, because the whole purpose of why the council wanted to have that committee is to look into that specifically. So instead of us saying like we don't know if we're gonna have time, we have other things to do, you have people that are volunteering, and I'm the first one to be able to help if anyone needs the help to install online voting. Now, when it comes to security, if definitely it's a concern with the administration, whether they're going to tamper the elections or not. That's why it's very important for us to make sure that the platform that we're using is also secure. So if we're going to use Concordia as a platform for the elections, at least maybe we can use a security company. I don't know how these things work, but like an IT company that potentially can overlook and make sure that there's no hacking or no Russians. Yeah, an audit. There you go. So it's very easy to execute. It's just about like actually doing the initiation and like having that motion. I'm actually even in favor of not having paper ballots in January, because I think we've wasted a lot of enough money when it came to this election that wasn't necessarily a success. So January could actually be a pilot project for the online voting, And if it's a failure, then we as council decide whether we want to use it or not. But that's why I actually highly recommend that we don't even use paper ballot in January. Like, let's just move straight to online voting and like trust the process, guys. That's it.
Rowan? David?
Can I amend the amendment?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Okay. So I motion to amend my motion, well, council's motion, no, that the online voting be given to the Elections and Participation Committee, and they see how to implement it and get the system going, and that the paper ballot system have less polling station, so that the cost just will go down, as the online option will make it easier anyways. Yeah, so, and also limit the polling stations.
Okay, that was
Does that make sense?
weirdly incoherent motion.
My apologies.
The gist that I get of it is that you want to refer the whole issue to committee, which is a thing.
His amendment was not related to the amendment on the table right now, which is
No.
about admin within Concordia, without Concordia.
But anyone can refer the whole issue to committee.
That's not what it is.
Yeah, were you trying to amend it, or were you trying to just push the whole thing to, that's what I'm trying to understand.
That was the amendment, was to push it to the.
Okay, that's not an amendment. That's like a whole motion to just refer the issue to committee, which is a thing as well. But you can't add on all that other stuff. So which one do you want to
all
do?
the other stuff, motion to elections and participation.
So
Okay.
point of order,
Yes.
point of order, is this to refer the discussion to the committee, or to refer the implementation of online voting to the committee to do? Because the implementation, so that's the difference, is because it's implementation, his amendment can't stand. It's not referring it to committee for discussion.
But it's not an amendment either. It's referring.
He's trying to refer it to committee to do it,
Well,
to
yeah, you
enact
can't-
the motion.
You can't tell the committee what to do.
But that's what
But that's what I'm saying, I'm placing this, okay. You know what, I'm gonna put another motion after this motion gets by, and I rescind.
Okay.
Just gonna make life easier.
It's not a Robert's Rules referral to committee.
Okay. I was having trouble understanding what your purpose was.
It's not a consultation.
It's here if you want to do that.
Chris?
Yeah, all right. I'm kind of lost, to be honest. I want to ask the chair something. Would it be possible at this point to divide the question into, first, do we want online voting, and then how are we going to implement on, which company or service do we want to go to for
No, because that's not what the motion says. The amendment is just, like, it's already divided because you're voting on the amendment, which is to do it with the university or not, and then if you vote yes on that, that gets tacked onto the main motion.
I'm sure the room might be lost too. Could you reread the motion that we're currently discussing and the amendment we're currently discussing?
Yes. Michelle, do you have the exact wording?
Michelle.
Oh, great.
Oh yeah, I have it. So
Yes. Yeah, just let Tammy read the motion, please.
So the motion that I have, and sorry, this is not like the greatest, but motion that to have online voting option as well as paper ballot option for the next January election, and the amendment was that online voting will not use any kind of sources that are from the administrative side.
Yeah, the exact wording was to have it be independent from the university administration. Thank you. So you're like the question's already divided, because one is to implement online voting and the second is the amendment. Does that make sense?
Okay. Then on that point, I'd like to speak to the room. I would suggest that we just vote down this amendment. We pass that we want online voting, simply that. And then we take a 20-minute break and we discuss how we want to do online voting. So, next person, if you want, you could call the question and we could get this ball rolling.
Great, thank you. Cami?
Yep. All of you, counselor, pride yourself into representing the students in this council, and this question was supposed to go on referendum, and now all you want is just to pass it in this room all alone without any democracy. That is fucked up. I'm sorry.
Decorum, please.
Wow.
Yes?
Possible. Do you need a referendum to pass something like? Do we need online voting? Or is that just something done for the students at large?
It's done, yeah, it's done for the students at large because the bylaws never explicitly state anything about paper ballots. There's 4 standing regs that do. So a standing regulation can be not withstood, whereas a bylaw needs a referendum. So technically it does not need a referendum. From my understanding, the purpose of the referendum was a consultation. Chris? Yes?
I was just looking this up now. Regulations, so setting regulations 325 to 331 set out the process for paper ballots, like how the paper ballots must look.
That is what she
It
said.
says, the referendum, its question itself would not have actually repealed any of those bylaws. It says, do you support online voting? It didn't say the CSU's elections will be online, which actually I think the question is a bit too ambiguous. So ultimately we would require some sort of council motion, even if the referendum had passed, to change the wording of the regulations to make online possible.
Yes, that is correct. Where was I now? Artem, welcome back to council.
All right. I guess we're talking about just online voting right now, right?
The amendment right now, which is to be independent from the university administration.
I'll resign and I'll go back and speak list when we're back to the main.
Okay, I can do that. Marlene.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to say that I would like to hear more about like the student at large. We heard a lot about the executive members of councils and prospective candidates, but student at large, you guys have a different intake into this whole thing than us, and I would really like to hear about you guys. I see that a lot of you guys have already left, but I would just, you know, your opinion is really important to us, and I feel like we all have like different intakes, but like your opinion is not. I mean, I would like to hear it from you guys really right now. I do believe that yes, I mean, I did see there's some of them that you guys some of them are already talking, but I would like to see others talk as well. I do believe that online voting is